This meeting will come to order. Welcome, everyone. This is the work session for Tuesday, March 15, 2016 of the Marion City Council. We begin with a presentation on the banners.
Seeing the one on the bridge.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill from the Chamber. I don't know if you need my address. No, not work session. Okay. I think you guys got a copy of the toolkit that the Chamber designed alongside with Uptown Marion and the City of Marion and Medco. So I just wanted to make sure everybody had an opportunity to see that. It's about a 16-page document. Let's see. And we just were out researching different communities and looking for things that we could do during this construction process to make it easier on the business community. And these construction guides are one of the things that we found, and we worked hard to try to tailor it to Marion. We've been working on something like this for probably 18 months now. We went up and visited Cedar Falls over a year ago to try to pick their brains on what they did when their downtown was under reconstruction. And so some of those ideas are highlighted in there, but it basically gives tips and tricks and reminders on how to manage your payroll when sales are a little bit softer due to construction, how to effectively and creatively use social marketing tactics in order to drive people into your business, offering different promotions, encouraging them to partner with other businesses in the neighborhood, how to celebrate after it's all done with, and even before with groundbreakings and afterwards with ribbon cuttings. There's critical contact information in there, including all of your names and contact information, the city's engineering department, chamber numbers, Medco numbers. So if they have a specific issue, they're going to be able to get in contact with us. We've been walking these packets around to the businesses that are going to be probably majorly impacted by the construction. So definitely the Four Corners. We went and met with them on Friday. Country Kitchen, Chuck Kent's agency, Bank of the West, Zio Jono's, and then we took a little kind of memo along with how they could get to this packet on our website. To some of the outlying businesses to make sure that they understood where they could find this information. It's not just for chamber members. We're making it available to everybody, and it also goes beyond the Central Corridor project, since we're going to have a lot of construction projects going on in Marion in the months to come. In addition to that packet, we also, you might have seen these banners that are hanging now above the viaduct. They say, "Progress ahead" or "Progress ahead. Marion businesses, #open for you." So that's kind of going to be our little marketing campaign that we use throughout the construction process. They're going to be at the viaduct on the east end, and then on the west end, we've got a different set going up. They're being made right now, should be ready by the end of this week. The one to the east end will look like that, and it will go just south of the AutoZone, the parts store there on 7th Avenue and 31st Street. So that will be the front, and since the back side of it will also be visible, we just did the community brand. So that's what the back of it will look like. It'll be 20 feet wide, 4 feet tall. We're anchoring it in with 4x4s and little caps, so it looks a little bit more professional. City engineer Mike went out with us the other day, and we got all the utilities located, so we hope to have those up next week. So no matter which end you're coming in from on 7th Avenue, we're going to be hitting you with the message that Marion businesses are open for you, and that 2 lanes of traffic will be maintained, so you'll be able to get through there. Trying to keep people from using 6th and 8th Avenues. We want them to keep using our businesses on 7th. The other thing that we just are going to ask council about is we're wanting to purchase these through Prison Industries because they are quite a bit more affordable through there. So if possible, the chamber will pay for the banners, but we'd like to run the invoice through the City of Marion if possible. So we can take advantage of that pricing. We called around on pricing, and if we go elsewhere, they're double and even triple the cost. So
Makes sense.
we don't know how they're going to hold up because they are vinyl banners. So there's a chance that we could have to replace them before it's all said and done.
Is that something we vote on, or how?
Now, generally, as long as the city council is okay with it, we would be able to go ahead and do that. There's only certain entities that can buy directly from prison industries. We're the right classification.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, this is a favor that the chamber is taking the lead on for the city as a whole, and for the city council in terms of putting up these signs. So and the design is great. I think it's a great thing you're doing. So I would have no objection to doing that.
Great, thanks. I have to give a shout out to Ashley. She designed them, so she did a great job on that. And then I also should mention that we've been communicating this process to the public probably for the last 6 to 8 months. The businesses that I mentioned earlier on the four corners have all had 20 by 30 posters in their businesses on easels that talk through the project and the timeline of the project. And so Amber is rebranding those right now, and we should be delivering those hopefully by the end of this week. And then we will also be available after the open house with more of the toolkits. If businesses attend that open house and want a copy of it, we'll be there as well to pass those out.
Great. Any questions for Jill?
No, Jill, have you thought about some smaller versions for or even a bumper sticker size, for
Yep. Yeah, we can definitely look into that.
Because, the other businesses are supportive of the business that are being.
Kind of like a cling, are you thinking, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. It's a good idea.
Any other questions for Jill?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have a presentation regarding solar project. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am Carmen McShane. I'm the director of the Cedar Rapids-Linn County Solid Waste Agency, of which you're all members. I've had the opportunity,
Welcome.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to work with many of you. You have a representative on our board of directors, Mr. Terry Chu. And I wanted to get in front of you today because we're doing a project that I wanted to make you aware of and certainly address any concerns that you might have. We have, may I use this?
Yes.
Okay. The agency went out for RFP to expand our environmental management footprint and include solar power as part of that. When the responses came back, one of the developers, which we are negotiating with, said we would really like to put the solar panels on top of the berm. This berm is along Highway 13, and it is a landscaping berm that the purpose of which was to landscape the solid waste agency from our neighbors.
Screening.
City of Marion, yes. It provided a screen. There are numerous trees planted on the berm, and some have died. They've all been replanted. We have a landscaping committee, and we have a landscape agreement with Linn County, which dictates how many trees go on that berm. So this project came about, and I met with Tom Trahorn in planning, and we discussed the feasibility of removing the trees and replanting them, spading them up and replanting them in other locations on the berm to allow for the panels to be directly on top. The panels are approximately 19 feet tall from the bottom to the ground. This concept was done, let's see, this is going north. I have another view. Oh, that's the same one. They look alike. Just a second. Sorry. Oh, here we go. This is the other direction. So that's going north. The other one was coming south, and this is in fact what it would look like. I'm starting here with you all because if you do have concerns about the view shed or our landscaping agreement, then I want to get back to the developer early and say we need to select another location. Some people, I did meet with Prospect Meadows across the road. I presented to their board. They were gung-ho about it, said, no, we don't care, we think it's cool. That was just their non-official response. I asked them to please get back to me with any concerns. I received an email back saying they were very supportive of the project. We too would like to put up panels. So I'm here to address questions that you might have or solicit input about the project. It is approximately 200 kilowatts. It originally started out at over 300, and we have downscaled it. So my original information to your planning department included about 1,100 feet of panels, the line. It is now probably about 700. It's been scaled back. We did a sizing analysis of our needs, and we have scaled that back.
Do you know how many of those there will be?
Yes, I do. There would be approximately 24 in that line that you could see from the road. And as we move forward, we have not signed a contract. We have not dictated the exact location, which is why I'm talking to you now. So that could go up a little ways on the berm, but the idea with the panels is to locate them as close as possible to the highest usage meters, and that would be our pump station and the landfill gas to energy engine. So that's why they're on that side of the site.
What's the consideration that dictates that that they should be on top of the berm?
Well, sunlight facing south, no shadows.
They can't be like on the side of the berm. They have to be on top.
They are self-balancing, so they can certainly be maybe a little towards the side, but I think for the most efficient installation costs, the piers that you put in and, the footings, that was probably the least expensive option for the developer.
Okay. I'm just trying to draw out all the considerations.
Yeah, no,
that
absolutely.
Maybe going through people's minds.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Any other questions? Any questions for her?
Do these track the sun, or are they fixed?
Yeah.
They do track. So they will actually be turned to the east.
Oh, no, they don't track
They
this
don't-
way. They tilt. They tilt
They tilt.
north,
Well,
south.
my question is like, that's a pretty shiny surface, and I wondered if it will have glare on it for like people going north.
For vehicles. It is actually, I didn't bring the exact setback, but we did have our engineering department look at that, and there should be zero impact to cars traveling on the road in either direction.
And they got to look at all seasons and all times.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And also, is this a storage? Do you have storage for night? Or do you
Is
have
it
capacitive storage or battery storage?
No, we do not, but we would be net metering, so,
Okay, so you're metering during the day
right.
and reimbursed. Okay,
Right.
very good.
Well, probably the fact that it's on top of the berm would eliminate the glare to the traffic. I think it would probably,
Well, my
It's high
concern
up
was if
there.
it actually turned to the
but it
east,
doesn't, it just tilts
yeah,
and
then it's going to be right in your eyes in the morning.
No, absolutely. It doesn't turn that way.
So that was my concern.
well,
And
of
it's on
course,
top.
nothing faces them, it would be out of the side.
Right, but then it's like noon or so, because these are pointed due south, apparently.
Yes,
And so during the noon hour, there could be a point, possibly, where the glare would come over
But
there.
that's why they're on the top of the berm, is that it'll elevate them high enough so that it will not be within sight distance, right?
mm-hmm.
Thank you. See, and I'm not even an engineer.
What about our airport and airplanes? Will they give any bad reflections? Our new
Not the
airport
expert on that,
commission might be able to answer that.
Yeah.
Are we-
I wouldn't think so. I mean, any other aircraft flying around.
Well, I don't know, it's kind of in the flight path.
Yeah, as I recall on this one, Paul, the protected flight zone for the north-south runway would all be on the east side of Highway 13, but we could run the data out to Luxair and they could take a look at it.
Yeah, wouldn't hurt to ask, is all I'm saying.
Might be a good idea just to take care of that.
Sure,
We
that's
can
something I
Put
had
our
not
minds at ease on
considered.
that.
So it's 700 feet of solar panels. How many feet is the actual berm itself?
The berm?
The, yeah, the,
The berm is about 26 feet across on top. It's a large berm, larger than it looks from the highway. So the panels are 13 feet long.
I mean, so north-south, how, so you said you're gonna have 700 feet of
Right.
solar panel.
Well,
Correct.
that is the line, 700 feet with them facing like
Right.
this. So that would be the distance.
So you've got your berm, 700 feet. How big is the actual berm?
Oh, the total
long?
distance of the
Total.
berm?
So how
Well,
much of the berm is this gonna take up?
I do not have an accurate measurement on that. I would estimate it's less than a third,
Less than, okay.
but that's an estimate. I will
Sure,
get back
sure.
to you with an actual number.
Sure.
Dan, did you have a
Yeah, I was just
comment?
wondering, she mentioned the developer. Is the agency going to be the owner, or is it a lease agreement?
That has not been finalized.
Okay.
We put our RFP out in under 2 scenarios.
So long-term maintenance would depend on that?
It would.
Okay.
And there is also the possibility that a third party would own and operate it for the first 7 years, and then the agency would assume that ownership.
What's your concern, Dan? Just,
10 years down the road, when they start malfunctioning and become an eyesore, who's going to take care of them?
who would
Pardon?
who would take care of them?
Well, no one would be making, I mean, there wouldn't be any money generated if they were non-functioning, so.
Now, they have a lifespan, and that's why I'm wondering.
Right.
Is at some point,
These particular panels that we are sourcing are made in America. They have a 25-year guarantee, and part of the purchase power agreement also covers the both mowing or trimming warranty under them and repair of the panels. So there's actually a pretty specific application that comes up on your phone and shows you even when part of one of the squares of the big squares is out, you can see where it is malfunctioning so that you're actually maximizing power production. And it's come a long way since we first started looking at it. I'm really quite excited just about the potential of solar development.
So you're doing this as a moneymaker?
No, we're doing this to offset our own energy production, but certainly we aren't in it to lose money.
Yeah. But there will be excess?
There will be some excess. We have actually 8 separate meters on our site, so there would be 6 separate interconnect agreements because the meters are all separately metered. So while the panel looks like one large array, it is actually certain sections go to different meters on site.
Okay.
Those trees were put there as part of the agreement with Marion. Where will you put those?
We will move them on either side of the berm. They would still be on the berm, but not in the location of where the panels are, obviously.
They could be moved closer to the road, or you wouldn't see them away from the road.
No, you would see them around the 13-acre pond development, which I should have brought a picture of.
Down towards Artesian Road.
Down towards Artesian, yes. Or is it Echo Hill now? Is it Artesian? I think they renamed that road.
It's still Artesian.
Oh, you would know, yes. Anyway, they would be buffering more to the south. So as you drove up, that would buffer that large dirt stockpile that you can still see from the road.
So we would have to amend our agreement, Lon or Don?
I don't know that the agreement addresses the berm area on the south. There's a height limitation. What's that?
Trees. Something to hide what's behind it.
The agreement on the trees, if I may, is actually with Lynn County. That was part of our rezoning. We have gone to Lynn County, and they have to amend their ordinance to allow solar as an accessory use in that district.
Okay.
They are in the process. That has not been completed, but we have requested to allow it. Now, Lynn County could say we don't want them there, we want the trees there. The intent of the landscaping agreement was to provide a buffer. Marion had representatives on the landscaping committee when we first planted. We had the neighbors across the road. Some were county residents, some were Marion residents that helped us lay out how it was the ultimate look and the caliper of the tree and the species and those things. So it isn't clear that we need written permission, but I certainly want people to embrace it. If you don't, we want to know early.
We'll take a look, but there's not something that leaps out at me from memory that would be an impediment on our agreement. The height limitations in there are applied to the cells themselves, and they're much taller than the berm is, so I don't think you'd be bumping into that height limitation with these.
Thank you.
But we'll take a look.
What if Lynn County doesn't agree and they want the trees there? Is there another place on your property that you could put the panels?
We have looked at different areas. I think, yes, absolutely. We could look at different locations. There is a challenge with other places because we do have a lot of dust and emissions coming off of our daily operations. And so we are looking for locations that they would be obviously the cleanest. And we thought, I guess the intent is to use it also as an educational project, and we thought it would be very visual in that location.
Do you believe this will lower our tipping fees?
No, I do not.
I had to ask.
You certainly did, and I appreciate it, and I'm not going to lead you astray.
I wouldn't have earned my pay if I hadn't asked.
Any other questions for Carmen? From the city's staff perspective, any concerns, anything to think about? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
And I will leave some cards. You can email me with more questions as they come up.
Thank you, Carmen. Okay, public services.
Yeah, Ryan is out the first couple of days this week, so I'll field this one. Essentially, as the council will remember, we had worked with the Medco Holding Company to provide an incentive for Fiberite to build a building on a lot down in Industrial Center East. This is on the corner of 44th Street and 3rd Avenue. As the project has developed and as ethanol markets have changed, Fiberite is moving from wanting to build a factory into a mode where they would be licensing technology, and they no longer need a facility of the size or scale of what they were looking at before. So they are offering the lot back to the city for the cost of the difference between what they paid and the amount of the incentive was that we originally provided. So we'll receive that lot back. It's about 14 and a half acres. We already have some other parties that are interested in purchasing it and parceling it out that are on the agenda later for action, but they aren't going to need the piece, and as part of our agreements with them, if they don't proceed with the project, we want to make sure that we can do what's called a clawback and get that property back. So this is how we get it back. There's still the normal real estate transaction that'll have to take place. We'll have to update the abstract, have the title opinion done, and go through the regular closing process. But this is to authorize us to pay for that offset between their purchase price and the amount of assistance we originally provided.
Any questions on that? None? Okay, thanks, Lon. Police?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the council. In your packets, I had the sheet on the repairs that were needed for Ariel to refurbish it. It's going to come up more than what we had thought.
Okay.
If you remember, the original estimate I gave you was to repair the turntable of the Ariel, which came in at about $24,000. No, I think it was $17,000, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. And in that $17,000 was $2,000 and some to do the 5-year inspection, which is required by OSHA as well as NFPA. During the 5-year inspection that they conducted, they found the other repairs. And the engine is 22 years old, and it appears that a lot of the repairs had to do with rust of some of the major cylinders. So that's where the repairs are needed in order to use the truck further. So, do you have any questions? Some of the funding, I think we can get through LOST. When I meet with the committee, they did put aside so much money towards the new pumper truck, and we didn't spend it all. and some of that money could be used towards the equipment, and then the money I use towards the equipment could actually be put back towards the aerial, if that makes any sense.
Perfect sense.
Yeah. And I also talked with Juan about maybe using some of the reserve funds, I do believe. So,
The only other thing I would mention is that, as Chief Crable stated, the vehicle is 22 years old, and to date, we really haven't spent much on repairs of it other than basic general maintenance, so it has served us very, very well over that period of time. And if we can spend this money on it and get another 5-7 years out of it, it's definitely a worthwhile investment, given what it costs to buy a new one.
I'd like to remind you again that the one Cedar Rapids bought at the same time is in their scrapyard down on C Avenue. Ours still looks like a new truck, and it'll serve us for a good long time after we get it fixed. So
I believe everything that they found would have been hidden. It wasn't something that was
Right.
visible without taking the vehicle
Right.
apart to actually see where the rust was showing up.
So now the total is 42,195, is that what
that's
you're
correct.
asking?
Yes.
And you're asking it for a lot from the loss, the whole?
No,
Just
I can only get a portion from the loss,
the-
but we had
only
looked
the
at
extra?
yeah. Yes.
Well, that video I gave you, that was a very simple ladder.
I think we should put that in a public forum sometime, too. So.
Any
Other
questions for
questions?
the chief?
Thank you.
Engineering?
Don't be distracted by the video or the image yet. We're going to start with item number 3, which is the notice from the DOT, basically informing us of the patching project that will be going on Highway 151 from US 30 up to basically Walmart. I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. It'll be all summer long. They're also going to overlay north of Walmart up north to County Home Road, I think it is. So have a lot of activity out there this year, just kind of so that you're aware of it. Questions or anything?
Will they fix that dip that's just north of Culver's on the northbound lane?
I think the intent is, yes. I don't know if they'll take it all out, but it'll be better than it was. They're adding left turn lanes, extending the left turn lanes, and adding some right decel lanes as well. They won't be painted that way, but they'll be available for use.
North of 151?
Yes, 15113 there, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. The next item is item 4, which is deferring the sewer connection requirement for the septic tank at 2489 Highway 13. I kind of explained this a little bit at the end of the meeting last time. Basically, the owner there has a septic tank that's going bad that they need to fix before they sell the house. Within the city code, the property has to be within 250 feet of an existing sewer. In the Lynn County code, the house has to be within 250 feet. So it's kind of a conflict between our two codes. We're probably going to get it cleaned up a little bit. We brought our code basically for some problems we had with adjacent owners not being hooked up. But in this situation where they have a very, very wide property, they looked into subdividing it to cover some of the costs, which were about $65,000. They'd rather not do that, and I'm not sure that we really need to force them to do that. So we're recommending that we defer the code requirement that would make them hook up in city code. They are in the city, but Lynn County Health basically regulates septic tanks in Lynn County. Questions on that?
Any questions?
Was this the property, Dan, that was divided? Did they divide this up or something a couple of years ago?
They tried to. They started to, but they never got it done, the Sykeses. It's just south of Casina, just south of the church senior housing there.
Yeah.
the first property on the south.
So that's fallen through then, and they're not gonna do that, or?
Yeah, the costs of infrastructure installation was just beyond what they wanted to spend.
Okay, so this won't affect, if they went back and tried to do that, will that affect that?
No, they could, the new owner could go ahead and subdivide it if they wanted to. It can be subdivided into 3 lots, I think it was. Probably would have paid for the project, but it really wasn't worth the effort. These are absentee owners, so they're not even in Iowa, so they're not looking to be involved in the property.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions for Dan on that? Okay.
Next item is item 5, which is directing staff to solicit design proposals for the 2016 Albernet Road Extension Project concept study. As you can see by the memo, the 2015-16 budget includes $1.3 million of local option sales tax funding for the Albernet Road Extension Project. To start that project, we will need to do a study. We would do RFPs to request proposals, to have a full-blown study like we did on Tower Terrace Road Bridge. Basically, this would look at preliminary survey, traffic evaluation, geotechnical engineering, wetland delineation, cultural resource investigation, environmental evaluation, hydraulic analysis of the bridge, horizontal and profile alignments, bridge span alternatives, right-of-way evaluations, acquisitions, and design concept preparation. This will be involved, probably take 6 to 8, maybe 9 months to do. It'll be the one we have on Tower Terrace is about this thick, so it's very involved. It's the first step we need to do. As you can see by the maps, this map here shows the alignment. Well, let's start over here. This one shows the potential alignment that was adopted by council in '06, I think it was. Basically shows up through here. This portion now has been built as part of the development. This map shows what that development will eventually look like. All these are lots all through here with this main traffic. The concept study would also cover this section that goes on up into this eventual intersection, and then this alignment here will be changed to not connect in. So
There won't be any driveways onto the...
no, they're not. It's completely access control. We have several streets coming onto it, as you can see. And these are streets. These darker areas are streets that come on.
But this is just to begin the design phase. And then when do we expect to see the project started?
Well, with that comes a cost estimate. With the bridge estimate, the acquisitions of properties. Let's see if we can... Yeah, it goes all the way down. This is 7th Avenue on the south, right here. The alignment actually currently calls for, we would look at this again, but currently calls for acquisition of these properties on the west side of 2nd Avenue. That would be the first phase of preparation for the project. Once we have the concept study, we would have an estimate of cost. We could then figure out how much council wants to provide for the project. The 1.3 will not cover it. But will get us a good start. We will not use all of that 1.3, but I'm guessing we're going to need another $3 to $5 million to finish the project. I did notice in the CIP that it was a priority, so hopefully
Will any more funds come from Lost, or?
They're not designated for this project, no. We could reallocate some project costs if that's a priority of council.
I mean, just looking at how 10th Street is in the mornings, I can't see how this isn't a priority project.
Yeah, congestion is terrible, and that is what this project does, is pull that congestion off 10th Street.
Yeah, I mean,
at Central.
Dan, that black line that you had on, is that the viaduct at First Avenue, that other picture you had up there?
The other picture or this one?
No, I think it was on the other one.
The other one? Down here?
Black line here, yeah.
Yeah, that's currently the
viaduct would be right
here.
there.
Yeah, the intent right now is to study this intersection to see if it can be built with the viaduct in place, but I think the long-term intent is for the viaduct to go away, so this
The trail is on the viaduct.
we have a $1.3 million, $1.5 million to build a new bridge there in that location through the CMPO.
Thought that was a high bridge.
We have 1.5 for each one.
Well, and they'll be starting some of the discussion actually this summer. Right. Regarding the bridges, those dollars were provided for through the CMPO, and some of the work here and some of the work being done on the bridges will kind of want to play off the other because it may have something to do with location of the intersection improvements or the bridge improvements, depending on how some of that engineering comes out. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, the intersection as currently expected to be constructed will not fit into the current configuration with the bridge. But I don't want to get ahead of it. You know, we do want to get through a public input situation with the bridge and so forth. We could push this alignment to the east side of 2nd Street to accommodate the bridge to stay, but that's a lot bigger number for construction.
When you say the bridge, you're talking about the existing viaduct?
Yes.
So if there's already funding in place for a new bridge, why are we even
Council has
talking about
not
that?
officially made that decision.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm not going to stand up here today and say it's going to come out.
Well,
Sensitive issue.
Yes.
When you
There
have
is
a
there is
totally efficient bridge that would cross as far as a trail is concerned, and God knows if it held up trains, it certainly is going to hold up bicycles and foot traffic.
Yeah.
I would be really, I think, remiss to vote for a new bridge.
Yeah, I thought it was already in place. That's why I asked the question. I didn't know.
Yeah, no, the funding's in place. There is good argument to take it out. I know there is support to keep it. It will be a maintenance issue where a new bridge would not be.
I mean, if we kept it, there would need to be some work on it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then-
A lot of the deck is gone, and a lot of work needs to be done as far as safety railings and et cetera, et cetera. We would like to see some kind of distinctive bridge go in there. There would be a real entrance eye catcher at the
An
beginning,
entrance
front end.
feature to the city.
Yeah, a feature for the city.
Well, once again, it's removing part of Marion's heritage, I mean, the railroad. And what would be the cost of demolition and disposing of the material?
I think you bring up a good point, Mary Lou, and that's why Dan is not giving an answer.
Yeah.
We're going to go through a process.
This is a process, and there will be discussion. So.
That's why I brought it up. There's two processes going. This
good.
has been done internally by dollars from the city. The other process is a federally funded process, so it's not like we can mesh the two. So we're going to try and get them done kind of at the same time so the conversation is going on and we can get some direction on how to move forward. That's the concept. The money available, was it or almost $3 million, I think, that we have for the bridges together is available now. So we need to start that planning because it takes so long to get through the process. That's why we're proceeding with this study as well, is to kind of see where we are with the intersection. Part of the reason.
The major part of this study is dealing with the new bridge over Indian Creek, and doing the TSNL, the type and length, type, style, and length, type, size, and length. I don't know. The TSNL to determine the bridge length and so forth, and look at the wetlands, look at the hydraulics of that new bridge and how it affects Indian Creek. They're going to look at the parcel acquisitions and so forth and those possible costs. The intersection down here with the bridge is kind of a small portion of it, and that's why we want to get these two studies going kind of at the same time so that we can talk about both.
This is a beginning step that will eventually lead us to having the conversation about the viaduct.
Well, the viaduct, in some ways, will be a separate conversation that this one will be used as information for that conversation.
That's coming down the road.
Yeah.
So does the path of this, does it cut through the park there? Will it cut the park in half?
Yes, it basically does. When they built the latest shelter, I know that's not very good, but they built the latest shelter they wanted to make. They tried to stay out of this alignment. So.
Yeah.
So the park will stay, or some portion of it.
Oh, yeah, a lot of the park will stay. If you remember also, in this, I think it's in this area, the new power lines came through. We put those poles in locations where they would not impact this alignment as well. So we've been kind of working towards this all along for the last 10 years or better.
But that's actually what, the final alignment is what this will help determine. And for the benefit of those that weren't on council, when we did this with the Tower Terrace Road project, one of the things that came out of that was they actually turned the bridge, which allowed us to shorten it, which made it less expensive. Those are the type of things that, I mean, at this point, the council has adopted an alignment, but it's just a rough alignment showing where the area might go. As they get in there and get into more of the details of the design, like Dan is talking about, that's when we'll figure out, okay, where does it make the most sense for the bridge to actually go so it's the most economical, and then that will influence where the ultimate alignment of the road goes.
We may find at this location that the bedrock's really bad around Indian Creek, so we can't build a bridge in that location, so we may have to shift it north or shift it south. We left this span here in the power lines is very long to accommodate that eventual bridge going through there. So we have to stay kind of in this area, but we're doing soil borings and bedrock samples and all kinds of stuff as part of this study.
That bridge a similar size to like what's on 29th Avenue? Or?
It'll probably be close to the one on 29th Avenue. It will not be this. The one on Tower Terrace is much longer because of the wetlands. I think we have the ability to shorten this span due to the cross section of the creek in this location.
You have like a fence or something to protect the park along there, or?
Only if that's what you want. This will be it'll be really not much different than Tower Terrace, not much different than 7th Avenue. It's pretty much like all our arterials. It's not really like an interstate, I guess I would say.
I was just thinking that, people are out in the park and stuff, that would...
Well, there'll be trails on both sides. There'll be buffering. There'll be lighting.
No different than Alburnett next to the park there now.
Yeah.
Lininger. Okay.
Lininger.
All right.
Any other questions for Dan?
Back quite a ways, though.
What's that?
Lininger, that's set back quite a ways. And
Now, this one's right through the middle of it. So.
yeah.
We will solicit. We will get proposals. We'll come back with a recommendation. From that recommendation, we will provide you a contract for services. You'll get to approve or deny that contract. So we're a long ways from the end here. This is just kind of giving us the right to go
We need to
forward.
get the process started. So
Yep.
That's what this is. Okay. Other questions? Next. That's it? No, there's more. Number 15.
There is more. Sorry. We did have two lettings recently. One was the sanitary sewer manhole project. We did receive 5 bids for that project. We did have good participation. The low bid was from Rachi Construction at 98.4% of estimate, or $44,470. Work shall begin no later than May 31st and take 25 working days. We do recommend award of that contract. Questions? That's that 4 manhole project, not very big. Okay.
You're not going to put the new logo on the manholes, are you?
We don't have any logos on the inside where they won't show.
Have them cast with the Marion logo on them.
We should do that. Number 17 and 18 is the Lau parking lot project. We were also very happy with this project. We did receive 8 bids. Had some really good ones. We had an estimate of $805,000. Bid came in at 83.4% of estimate, or $671,415.65. Work will begin no later than June 24th and take 50 working days. We are also recommending accepting those bids and awarding the contract to LL Pelling. Sorry, I didn't mention it.
When you finish this, you will have the path from the city street on up into Lau Park then? Is that correct,
Actually,
Mike?
I can...
That includes the
From,
street.
from the larger parking lot up to the amphitheater, we will have a 10-foot wide trail running from there.
That's included in this?
Everything
That is
pink,
included in this
everything
project.
pink in this project, in this
Okay.
image will be
Yeah,
built.
so you're right.
What's the city, I don't remember that street name. Is that Irish?
That's
It's Irish Drive,
Irish.
yeah.
So you'll have access up into the park then from Irish?
Yes, the road will currently stop at this point where the, what do you call it, maintenance garage?
Maintenance
or-
building.
Maintenance building's right here. This would provide parking not only for the amphitheater over here, but also for the ball diamonds over here. I think it's Mike's intent to close the road to the west and create a trail there and not a maintenance road eventually.
Yes, at some point in the future, the maintenance road that we have that goes up to the maintenance building off of the Oak Ridge parking lot will close. That'll be converted to a trail, connect into the asphalt trail, and we will get into the maintenance building by service road. That I can't tell, but I thought that was outlined. There was a line that showed the roadway that would get up to the maintenance building there, Dan. Might not be on that plan.
I don't see it on
Might
this
be
one.
on the other one. And in the future, where the road stubs by the ball diamond there now, that road will eventually continue up around the ball diamonds, and then there'll be a smaller parking lot that will also help to service the ball fields down below in that sports complex, but that's another phase.
So this actually includes the road, the trail, and 2 parking lots.
That's correct.
What's the time frame on this?
This summer.
But done before Swamp Fox?
Probably not.
I-
It'll be close. This area as well as the playground area, the future playground area.
And the playground area is part of the project. The grading work will be done for that, and then we'll come back to the playground, future project. That's probably next year by the time we get done with this phase.
Questions?
Money for that. So what was the original estimate?
805,000.
And
So
did we reallocated money for this?
Right, we've done a couple of reallocations of lost funding, and then we had some lost funding that was specifically to this project. So right now, current funding is at 830,000. And then within CIP, we had a request for an additional 200,000 of funding for the full build-out with the playground.
We will also have a follow-up lighting project as part of this. We're working on that now. That will come in and be installed afterwards. We're going to put conduit and stuff in now, but that's going to be in that 150,000 range. So we'll eat up quite a bit of that money that's been left over.
This is not more.
Other questions on this? Okay.
Okay, last item is the 2016 Sidewalk Assessment Project. Previously, council approved the preliminary calendar. There are several steps due to the state assessment process associated with this project that we have to go through. The next step is the approval of the final project calendar along with several other motions included within that. Following a public hearing, those that are on the assessment schedule have been notified and will have the opportunity to speak on Thursday night at the public open house.
Questions? None? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Have you heard back from anyone on these assessments, Dan, or
What's that?
have you heard any feedback on these assessments?
A few questions is all. Nothing hostile.
I guess I'm running the meeting, that's what I want to know.
Be prepared.
I think there are a few individuals that are a little concerned. We do not have any that I would consider really big this year, so I think you'll have a couple people come speak. But this is an ongoing program that we've been doing for 30, 40 years, and it's a definite good thing for the city to get these gaps filled. So, thank you.
My flak jacket.
Thank you, Dan. Planning.
Good afternoon. The first item under planning and development is a payment for Amanda Poshby's home on 5th Avenue. This is the corner of 5th Avenue and 15th Street. As you'll recall, this is the property just south of the vet clinic off of 6th Ave that's necessary for expansion of 15th up to 6th Ave for the Central Corridor project as we move through the area. We bought the property just before Christmas, and the payment here is to finalize moving expenses, and then replacement housing costs associated with the project. So the sum of that is $16,756 that's being requested to be paid at this point in time. And I wanted to talk to the council just a little bit about the process of establishing what we're calling the housing reimbursement portion of this. When we go in and we acquire a piece of property in a house in particular, we're required to provide for the owner of that home similar housing in the area. So what we have to do is we have to go through a process to evaluate all the houses that are on the market that are in similar that have similar characteristics as to the owner's home. So we do an appraisal of the property, and then we go out and we find other properties that are similar in character. So if it's a 2-bedroom, single-story home with a detached garage, we have to go find one of those in the market. And it has to be available and on the market at that time. Once we find that home, that kind of sets the parameters upon which the owner of the home is going to get additional dollars above the appraised house. So in other words, when we go in and we say to somebody, you're going to have to move because of our public project, we have to provide them the appraised value for their home and then what it would cost to move them to a home of similar characteristics and value and in a similar area. So we can't go over to the south side of Marion where maybe housing is a little less expensive and say, well, here's one over here off of whatever street. We can't do that. It's got to be in the area. So we went through, and if you look on the second or third page in your memo, you'll see there's a number of homes that were found at the time of the sale of this home that were similar in characteristics, and you'll see there's quite an array of values associated with those, ranging from $82,000 up to $105,000. We purchased this property at $85,900. The house that had the most similar characteristics to this house was determined to be 101. So you subtract that, and that's where you're going to get the 15,100 number. So that's the process that we go through when we're buying a house and there's someone living in that home. So I'll explain that as we go through the process so that there's an understanding with each one that we do an acquisition on. But I just wanted to outline that kind of in general terms on how that works. And this is a requirement of purchasing a home through the 6B process in accordance with state code. So
correct me if I'm wrong.
I have a problem with this.
This was for sale already, wasn't it?
Exactly.
This one was for sale.
We're already moving.
Correct.
So why would we give them more money?
Already moving. That fell through. The house was for sale, and they had a buyer, and then that fell through.
Correct. But then the city stepped in and purchased it.
Yes.
So they were already selling the house.
This is how we're required to buy it when it's with right away.
I don't think so. As long as the house was initially for sale, and regardless of the fact that that sale fell through, the city paid the asking price, correct?
The city paid for the appraised value.
Well, what they were asking for.
Ultimately, yes.
Okay. So why are we? No, that doesn't fall within the requirements of relocation.
That's when we're dealing with the state code.
I'm sorry, I can't go along with that. I don't care what we're supposed to. There are limits to what the city should be expected to pay for things.
I can't agree with you more, but when we get in a situation where we're not asking somebody to buy their property, we're telling them we're going to buy their property.
But the property is for sale.
Correct.
So
the difference arises when we're buying a property that's occupied versus a property that's unoccupied. If it was a case where they had bought another house, they'd already moved, and the house was listed up for sale, then we can go in and we can buy the property and we don't have to pay relocation expenses. But if it's a case where they are still living there, the transaction is different than a normal arm's length transaction. Chapter 6B of the State Code of Iowa sets out the process that we're required to follow. If we were not buying it for right-of-way, again, the process is different. If we were buying it for a park or we were buying it for something else, then we don't have to do that. But right-of-way is very clearly protected to make sure that you're not trampling on the private property rights of the owner. Don't necessarily like it, but our job is to make sure that we comply with the law, and sometimes complying with the law means that we have to do things we don't necessarily would want to do if it was something we were doing on our own.
And the other thing is if the house would not have, let's say the transaction would have went through, the purchase, we would have been doing this all with a new owner and dealing with the same situation and possibly a higher price. What's that?
That I could see.
Yeah.
Where we would do this if the transaction went through the first transaction and a new owner was there. But the fact that, and I understand if it's the state code and we have to follow it, but
this was, I will say that this has been the odd.
Can we double check to make sure that this is accurate, that you have to do this?
Yeah, we're dealing with the independent.
Positive.
Yeah. That's why we hired outside resources for it. The other thing this has been the oddest one that we've run into with regard to stepping into the middle of a transaction. If in fact the house would have sold to a new owner, we would have been basically approaching somebody who hadn't even lived in the house, and they would have been given the dollars and cents associated here without even having occupied the home.
Then are you adding this to the cost of the roundabout, the purported roundabout that'll be going in on 15th Street and 6th Avenue?
Am I adding this to the cost?
Mm-hmm.
We're acquiring all the property within the project, so it's all within the project.
So this will be added to the cost of the roundabout
all part
itself.
of the Central Corridor project, correct?
Not technically part of the roundabout, but part of the cost of the entire Central Corridor project.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, but the Central Corridor project does not extend to Fifth Avenue.
No, but the road will be, as a part of the Central Corridor, we're we're going to be building south of 6th to 5th to make the connection. You can't build a roundabout and connect it with 30-foot
well, then
right-of-way.
Don't build the roundabout and we don't have any problems, right?
Whether it's a
convince your
roundabout.
other council
In
members
fact,
to do
you
that.
know
Have the
what you're
exact
doing
same
is
issues.
You are destroying a house that would probably be on one of Judith Hull's plans, because that is a railroad house.
Well, whether it's a roundabout or not would be irrelevant. The city would not be able to go in and even reconstruct the existing road that's there on the current right-of-way. We've got, I think, a 20-plus foot wide road on 30 feet of right-of-way coming down through there, and right-of-way throughout the rest of the city is either on 60 feet or 66 feet. You'd end up with construction easements that would go all the way to the foundations to reconstruct the street. And so whether it's a roundabout or whether it was a conventional intersection, we would be needing to acquire this property and the vet clinic north of it.
Does that apply owner-occupied and renters? Is it the same?
Actually, when we get into the rental situation, it can be
worse.
It can be worse because we may have to pay a certain period of time of rent.
That's full.
Yeah, that house does have some historical significance in that it was a railroad house, so we may have to do a little work if we tear it down.
Yeah, we are the owners of it currently. This is just this is a payment for reimbursements of the housing relocation assistance. So. And this is why I did not just gloss over the payment. I wanted to explain the situation so that the council's aware of that. And like I said, every one of these becomes very unique. And I want to make sure that the council is aware of what's going on with these payments and purchases. So I will continue to do this throughout the process, especially if there's some oddities within them. So,
Tom, I just want to say that, I mean, you were the one that grabbed this up, seeing that it was for sale and had fallen through, and we followed up on it. You called me on a Friday afternoon and got the thing going and saved us money, because we would have had to pay a higher rate for the house had it gone through another buyer. So
very Potentially, yeah. I was in Sioux City when I called. I'm like, hey, we've got to do something.
Oh, I commend you for catching it there.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions on this?
I'm against it.
So that $15,000 is because of finding another house that was sold for 101 through the appraisal? What's the 15,000 here?
So
You said something about $101,000 house.
So if you look on the next page, there's a number of homes. It's blue. It's got the highlights.
Yeah.
These were houses that were on the market that were of similar characteristics. And you can see there's one that's higher, or two that are higher in price, and two that are lower.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be housing that's readily available and on the market at the time that the city is purchasing property. And the 101 was the one that was most similar in characteristics, and that was the price that was used to create the difference in the value. So let's say that they were not moving to another house. They already had a house that they were moving to. They bought a house that was $100,000 more than the house they were living in. Mm-hmm. We obviously aren't going to pay that difference, so we have to establish a value somewhere to justify what they would get if we in fact said you have to move and you got to move somewhere in immediately. So this is how that process is established. So we find all the houses that are for sale, find the one that most looks the same, operates the same, has the same characteristics, and then the difference between the house we're buying and the house that's for sale is the price that we're obligated to pay.
Okay. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I think I was in that house, that one that you're comparing it to, and I don't know if it's quite the same thing, but
yeah.
Anyway.
And it gets tough because sometimes you won't, like this was a very small house.
Yeah.
And you may not have a house that's on the market. And what do you do then? Then you have to find housing that is similar, but it's going to be more expensive. Maybe you have a one-bedroom home, single story, and there's not even one available on the market. All of a sudden, you have to find something that is comparable because you can't go to somebody and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're taking your home," and you've got to come up with an extra $30,000 because there's no homes of similar characteristics for you to move into.
So this is all state code that you have to do.
Yep.
With
Chapter
being
6B.
a right away.
Yeah.
And they won't buy yours, well.
No, probably not.
Okay.
Which one is the one that,
The last one,
okay, that's what I thought.
1114th Street.
The 101 for 101.
Right next to Emerson.
The next item, if you'd like me to move on, we're going to have a public hearing on an amendment to Chapter 55A of the Marion Code of Ordinances. This is specifically related to the chicken and ducks ordinance within the code. I provided you a copy of the changes. It really just provides the opportunity for congregate housing, nursing, or convalescent homes to have or acquire a permit and keep chickens or ducks. Any questions on that? Pretty straightforward.
Probably the same size lot and everything we had.
Yeah, all the other standards are maintained.
And we had one complaint about chickens or ducks.
I think we had one, and it was just a phone call, and it was a quick response. And I'm not really up. Kesha might know. 25 permits. You know? He's mapping them, so. 27, 28. Yeah, so 28 permits.
It's been very successful.
Yeah, I would say that it has, considering we've got that many permits and no complaints. This was when these ordinances were enacted across the state and the country, for that matter. There was a lot more conversation about them at the time of adopting the ordinance than I've heard come from any permit that's ever been issued. So,
And Tom, I had a question on the one, the receive and file to the P&Z.
Number 2? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, is that going to take out that, what is it, the Research Park buildings? Will those be torn out there?
No, I don't believe there's any demolition of any facilities on the site. It's the green space behind.
Okay.
Yeah, and we just got the plans in. So we're going through them all, but that's, yeah, I don't recall there being any demolition of buildings.
Is anyone using that building? Is someone occupying that building, or?
I believe there's tenants in there.
I think so.
I'm not, Lon, I don't know if you know if Maggot's got property down there?
Yeah,
or
Frank
Yeah,
Maggot.
it's partially occupied, not fully occupied.
Yeah.
There is some
It used
vacant
to be,
space in it.
I mean, they were going great guns, but I don't think they're,
No, they downsized significantly at one point.
They moved a lot of their operations up to the Twin Cities as well.
yeah, so that's why I was wondering if they, this would demolition some of their buildings there.
Yeah. No, I think that
I
there
guess
might
it's
be some
right
tenants,
there.
some space for lease. That's why I looked at Will. He's the real estate guy. He knows.
I'm pretty sure there's stuff in there. I have a question about chickens.
Yes.
With the current code, are you supposed to be able to see the coop from the road? Can you see is that allowed?
It's not really a parameter of whether you can see it from the road. It's got to be set back from adjacent properties. So there's nothing that says you can't not be able to see it from the road. The one that's most visible and the one that I think we received the complaint on was on Central.
That's the one I just noticed
Yeah,
today.
and yeah, exactly. And I think that one, that is one that I think we've had conversations about the siding used on it, because there are requirements that it's got to look similar to the housing. And I think that's the complaint that was received.
Sure.
So they've been redoing that house for some time.
Yeah.
So there's been some leeway. Granted, they redid the whole front yard, and so
The driveway.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know if the ballpark hits a ball over there, is that a foul ball?
there you go. There you go.
Sorry.
You couldn't resist, could you?
Are you an engineer?
Back to Mississippi with him.
I was waiting for some information on the active living and biophilic design projects. I'd prefer to just not discuss that this afternoon and hold off to a later time. And I'd like to get some items out to the council prior to having that discussion too. So if we can skip that item, I think we got a long enough agenda tonight without going into that. If you'd like me to move on to item 13, I can. And that is, we had some neighbors contact the city, and they asked to be placed on the agenda for a short conversation on an annexation project that we're working on. The location of a county neighborhood is here, hatched in the red, East Robbins Road, Alburnett. This is the roundabout at Tower Terrace in Alburnett. We've had a petition for annexation from the area in blue. As you can see from this, what it does is it creates an island of county property under the jurisdiction of the county that is not requesting to be annexed to the city. The way that we generally handle this is it becomes a voluntary petition, including non-consenting owners, if you have greater than 80% of the total area being petitioned to the state for annexation. We are right on the cusp when it comes to this project. This is about as close to an 80-20 as you can get. I think we may even be a little bit below at this point. The state has reviewed them, including or not including the right-of-way in the past, so they exclude the right-of-way. And we're still exploring options as to whether we should proceed with an annexation to the state, identifying the right-of-way just because of the circumstances that exist and challenging some of the administrative rules that they've provided at this point. We haven't made that decision, or we're not recommending that decision that we move forward at this point. We've contacted adjacent property owners. We've not received any indication back on whether they would like to proceed with the annexation. If you take a look at this map this is the area that we're talking. It's highlighted in blue. We've been annexing north of this area. We've been annexing west of this area, and Tower Terrace Road will ultimately go directly through this property. So from a development perspective and from an annexation perspective, this is right in line with where we should be growing. We've got a large project proposed on this site, estimated $22 million senior housing and assisted living facility is proposed to be located there. So at this point, we received the application. That's what's driving the annexation petition. It will not develop in the county. It has to be in the city. The state will not let us annex the property unless we solve this island issue. And so we're kind of stuck in a quandary of how to proceed. The owners have come forward and they provided a annexation agreement that they'd like us to consider. At this point, we've not really opened the conversation too far with regard to that agreement because we're still trying to determine if we've got enough to go forward with an annexation.
The owners of which?
Of this?
The
the neighborhood.
The neighbors.
Yeah.
Okay. So they do have.
They've
agree to
supplied
the
us with an
annexation?
agreement to an annexation agreement, which is very similar to the agreement that we
Are these the people in the
I think there's a
audience
few of
today,
them here.
the neighbors?
Yep.
Okay.
So, at this point, we're still exploring opportunities and proceeding with an 80-20, which is a voluntary petition containing non-consenting owners. They would like us to proceed and enter into an agreement, into a voluntary petition agreement, which has a number of stipulations outlined, most of which are similar to the 10th Street annexation that we proceeded with. But if you'll recall, in that situation, for some of you that were on the council and some that may not have been, we went to a neighborhood containing over 100 homes and said we would like you to annex, and we didn't have barely any voluntary petition. We just needed to get that property annexed to proceed with development north. So a little bit different circumstance, understand the concerns. We've met with the property owners out here on numerous occasions, and I'm sure they'd like to speak to the issue. But at this point, we don't really want to get into a position where we're negotiating against ourselves. If we have the opportunity to proceed with an 80-20 annexation, the recommendation would be proceed in that manner and not enter into agreements that tie our hands to certain stipulations down the road when we wouldn't need to do so. I know that sounds a little
If I could, I'd like to provide the council a little context on this too, especially for those of you that are newer to the council. The North 10th Street annexation and how that developed was specifically because over the years we had been avoiding doing 80-20 annexations. And so if you remember that area at all, what we had done is we created an area where you had kind of this bulb connected by 30 feet of county right-of-way that came down into these rural subdivisions that were literally surrounded entirely by the city, but for that 30-foot stripe. And we came to the council and made a presentation, might have been as far back as 2012, asking for instruction from the then city council about how we should proceed with future annexations. Because the alternatives in that area were to go and negotiate with the property owners, look at future 80-20 annexations, and then to look at doing an involuntary annexation petition. And as we moved through that, the instructions from the council were very clear. One was to try to negotiate first with the backup plan that if we weren't able to come to an agreement with the property owners in that neighborhood, that we would proceed with an involuntary annexation, but also very clear instruction that when opportunities presented themselves in the future, that the staff should do 80-20 annexations whenever possible. And so that's the mindset that we've proceeded with when we're going into these, is using that instruction from the council. There's different members on this council right now. If you wanted to deviate from that, that's entirely your prerogative to do so. But we've run into situations like that precisely because we didn't use the 80-20 statute in the past and ended up being in a situation where it took us 1.5 years to negotiate an agreement with the neighborhoods so that we weren't shut off from future annexations going further north up 10th Street. And so when we come into areas like this, if there's any possibility to do an 80-20 annexation, that's exactly what we're going to explore. Again, if you want us to do something different, that's perfectly fine. We would just need instruction from council to do so.
Questions or comments?
But you have an agreement that they have agreed to, correct? I mean, you have something that they've
proposal.
It's a proposal from the neighborhood,
and
correct?
I've talked to a couple of them there, and the proposal they want, I think it was 90 years for the payback, which is similar to what was on the North 10th Street payback as well. 90 years, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
There's
couple of
only-
things that we have to take a look at when we're doing those. One is that if we're going to come in and we are going to put in water and sanitary sewer with a large lot development like that, it can be very expensive for the property owner to make that connection. And one of the things that we discussed when we did that agreement was whether or not it was fair to expect the property owner who has the property right now to pay for all the cost of making that connection when future property owners will continue to benefit. So we took the long design life of those improvements and then divided out the cost of making those installations so that future owners would pay for that as well. As part of that, there's a surcharge that would be paid on the water and sewer bills for that entire period of time, plus there would be an amount that they would have to pay at the time of connection, and then the city would underwrite that piece underwrite those costs to a certain percentage as well. The downside to it for us is that we are tying our hands to that agreement going into the future. But the circumstances are a little bit different. That was 100 different properties that we were looking at, tremendously expensive project. This one is actually simpler to serve from the different directions that you can approach the property. We don't have costs. We don't know exactly what those would be to be able to make that connection. And along North 10th Street, we actually had properties where their systems were actively failing, and they were going to be needing to make some changes at some point in the next couple of years. Here, we don't really seem to have that, where there are property owners that have trouble. Homeowners have indicated that when they've talked to Lynn County about it, their properties are not failing the PERC test, so they may have the option to be able to re-up and put sanitary sewer in at some point in the future. What we really didn't want to tie our hands with on that other agreement was if we involuntarily annex, which was our only other option in that area, when you involuntarily annex, you must provide municipal services within 5 years. So if we had annexed, we would have had to put in water and sewer, we would have had to upgrade their streets to our standards, sidewalks, and then street lights. Basically turn it into a city subdivision. And we would have been compelled to do all that within a 5-year period. So up there, to avoid having to do that, there was a lot of benefit to the city to negotiate a voluntary annexation agreement. 80-20, same circumstances, they're considered non-consenting property owners, so they come in, the city is not compelled to have to make all those improvements until such time as they're actually needed. So that's why there's some differing circumstances between the two.
Your Honor, I'd like to remind council too that you just recently did an 80-20 very similar to this that only included transition of taxes.
I would ask to consider they probably have a spokesman from the group. Would you allow them to speak very shortly?
Well, what's coming next in the process on this? Will there be there'll be a public hearing?
Yes. The next step will be us bringing forward a resolution of intent for the council to proceed with annexation. So the council would actually pass legislation to proceed with annexation.
Okay.
This is just a discussion item.
Sure.
The residents I don't know if there was a desire to speak on the issue, but
Okay.
or not, and I don't know if you want to
Okay.
allow that. But they wanted to be on the agenda to kind of voice their issues with this
Then
proposal.
I think it's probably beneficial if we hear from them.
Okay.
Is there one person that would like to speak for the group? Or okay.
We got this on a PowerPoint file. I don't know if there's any quick way to set that up, but we have papers if not. I think
You don't have it so to put it
Sir?
on the machine.
we have papers.
Here, bring it here.
Just do it
I
on
think
the
I can get it.
machine.
Okay.
Is it the only file on there?
No, it's the only PowerPoint.
Okay.
Sir, please state your name and your address too.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name's Alan Tupker, and I live at 490 Heather Court in Ivy Air Acres, the part of the annexation that he was talking about. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Welcome.
It's telling me I need to format the disk before I can use it.
Okay.
Let me try it again. Okay. it says it's scan and fix. I can try continue without scanning and see if I can access it. Visuals. Yeah, let me switch it over so they can see it. You should be able to use that. Just roll the clicker and it'll...
These first slides were covered by Tom. I'm not going to talk about those. This is our area and the development area and the houses. Well, the residents of Ivy Air Acres would prefer to remain in the county, but realize that the city is expanding and will eventually have to join Marion. We just want to be treated fairly, and we feel that we have been treated poorly thus far. The problem is that the cost of this is onerous. We've been told that there's going to be an $1,100 per year tax increase, huge utility hookup related costs, so no residents have volunteered. We have been given no updated cost estimate. What we got was this. Cost data are from a first attempt at annexation in 2008. They were presented by Marion City Engineering. They were 4 proof of concept plans ranging from $14,000 to $29,000 per lot for sewer mains and installation only. The cost extrapolated to $38,400 to $66,300 per lot for sewer, water, and private costs in 2015 dollars, all payable at the time of hookup. Upon approval of the 80-20 annexation, those costs will kick in and will become a utility encumbrance which will drastically diminish the property values. It'll make it nearly impossible for us to sell our homes. We're required, of course, as you probably know, to disclose the encumbrance to potential buyers, and the amount will be unknown at the time. Upon hookup, some residents may have to sell their homes to pay the bill. Some may have to obtain a new mortgage if they even qualify. Right now, almost 2/3 of the residents are on fixed incomes or disabled in the neighborhood. Ivy Air Acres resident, where am I at? 7, yes. Ivy Air Acres residents do not object to being annexed, but do object to being annexed with unknown costs and details. The city is asking essentially for a consent to annex with a blank check on the cost. No one should be put in that position. Would you like to be put in that position? The developer isn't put in that position. If the costs aren't to his liking, the developer can walk away, but the property owners cannot. We've asked for a detailed cost, but the city has not given us any. As you heard before, the calculation of the land area is very close to 80% threshold on the 80-20 rule. Inclusion of 1 Ivy acre lot is significant to the calculation, and inclusion of the road area is significant to the calculation. Marion's original approach was to claim that they had 80%. We were offered tax phase-in done at Marion's discretion. It would be granted if at least 1 lot volunteers to annex. The conditional offering of tax phase-in is labeled as a strong-arm tactic in an article published in the Drake Journal of Agricultural Law. The 80% claim was based on counting road areas and smaller assessed acreage lots, not the actual acreage of the lots. Including the road areas in the calculation, as you know, is not allowed by state law without written permission from the county. And the 80% claim was disputed by the residents and unanimously rejected by the residents. Oh, that was that slide. Okay, 10. Marion's next approach turned into maybe we don't have 80%, and they explored adding the Klubeck property to the annexation area to get an overwhelming 80%. They contacted an Ivy Air Acres resident to get him to defect and tried to find avenues that would permit legally counting the roads and doing a legal risk assessment. We don't know what that is, but it sounds ominous. Then recently the kicker happened. A shill, an employee of Scenic Development Company, who is the developer for this project north of us, was used to purchase a property in Ivy Air Acres in the name of EAK Farms, LLC. EAK Farms was registered in Iowa on the same date that the offer on the property was made and accepted. EAK appears to be a front for Scenic Development. The purchase of this property may now really give Marion a long-sought 80% that they've been looking for to do the 80-20 annexation. We've also observed that pre-construction activity has been going on in February and March in the development area. The activities appeared to be soil testing and elevation mapping over the area. This is a long time before annexation and other legal necessities will be completed. It indicates to us that the developer thinks annexation is very certain. Marion's present mayor is listed as the attorney for the Downing family in several public legal documents. Marion's present mayor abstained from the vote to proceed with the 80-20 Downing annexation on December 17, indicating a possible conflict of interest. While we are not accusing the mayor of impropriety, the sum total of the tactics used by Marion and Scenic Development has the appearance of impropriety to us. On a side note, Ames was approached by Scenic Development LLC for a similar project. Scenic Development LLC threatened to take the project elsewhere if the tax abatement terms were not met. Marion has been similarly approached by Scenic Development. Ames rejected their tax abatement because it benefited a for-profit corporation, and Ames did not like to be threatened. Project was ultimately completed anyway. In summary, Marion has worked against the interest of its future citizens. There has been no compassion shown for the financial damage this will do to the residents. Marion Planning has refused to work with the residents in a cooperative manner toward an acceptable agreement to enter the city. Marion Planning insisted on exploring every other avenue first before working with the residents, who were actually willing to be annexed under the right circumstances if given a fair offer. Iowa Code 368.6 is a statement of intent by the legislature for annexation laws. Please note the underlined text. Here we find a fundamental statement of principle that the wishes and interests of the residents be considered. Almost all of the residents in the affected area live in the Ivy Air Acres. The 80-20 law is controversial, and law scholars have even written about it in law journals. Here's one here. The state legislature implemented this statute with the intent to make annexation easier, not to facilitate the use of strong-arm techniques to annex land. Here's another article. This one is entitled, Textbook Example of a Voluntary Annexation That Hardly Seems Voluntary. Drake Journal of Agricultural Law. The 80-20 rule was adopted to prevent the creation of islands and to create more uniform boundaries. The rule seems to achieve this purpose. Nonetheless, strong-arming, lies, threats, and broken promises continue to occur. This article was about a number of case studies out across Iowa regarding 80-20. And there's been guidance from the mayor. In the 22nd annual State of the City address, the mayor stressed the importance of handling Marion's growth responsibly in a way that minimizes negative effects on the lives of its residents. This from an article in the Gazette describing the city address. Oh. Give you a chance to read. So which Marion do you want to be? Do we have a Marion that we Ivy Air Acres residents have experienced up to this point, or do we have the Marion that the mayor described in his speech? This annexation looks like crony capitalism, unethical practices, and immoral, deceitful tactics to win at all costs, orchestrated from the beginning of the project. The results are a multi-million-dollar out-of-town corporation is getting a profitable project, wants and may get tax breaks. The farm owner stands to profit while Ivy Air Acres residents get stuck with huge costs. This is not fair for current residents to pay high costs while others profit. The council directed the staff to do an 80-20 annexation, which will do great financial harm to Ivy Air Acres residents. Marion is not making any new friends with the 80-20 annexations. It's time to stop doing 80-20 annexations without fair consideration for all those involved. The city council has the power to change this. We request that the Marion City Council direct the staff to negotiate a mutually acceptable agreement with the residents of Ivy Air Acres. And we've submitted one possible draft agreement, which they have on file. And that's the conclusion.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Thank you.
I was under the impression that on certain annexations, if there were wells and septic tanks, that they would stay that way, that they would not be forced to add to the...
We were told that.
Okay.
Yep, that's not part of the problem.
Oh, okay.
Part of the problem is the cost of the sewer mains and water.
Well, that...
If I could, one of the things that I'd like to, again, to provide some context with the council is to talk about what we've done with these different annexations. 10th Street, which is the one that they're basing the agreement off of, was a voluntary annexation where we had to approach the property owners. Our only other alternative was to go to involuntary annexation, which would have had a huge price tag for everybody else in the city of Marion in order to serve that area with water and sewer. The more recent ones that we have done on an 80-20 basis, which would include the ones like Smithland and those properties up off of Echo Hill, we have done with the transition on the imposition of taxes. So if we then turn around and negotiate an agreement with the 15 homes in this subdivision differently than we did with the people that live out there, we now, by rights, probably need to go back to those neighborhoods and start to renegotiate again. From our view, we're trying to be consistent with our past practice on these annexations. Past practice has been that if a property owner comes in and is a consenting owner, that's when we do the transition on taxes. And with all due respect to the property owners out there, I understand that there is definitely an increase in costs, but this really illustrates the dangers of development happening too close into communities. You know, there's other subdivisions that this is likely going to happen to in between Albernet, or between Tower Terrace Road and County Home Road at some point in the future. When you've got growing communities, eventually they grow up around them. You know, since those homes were built, they have been enjoying a lower cost for taxes, a lower cost for utilities, while at the same time having access to all city services. You can make a counter argument that everybody in Marion who's been paying to maintain Albernet Road and East Robbins Road all those years has been subsidizing those lower taxes for the residents that live in these rural areas. So while their argument does have some merit, I'm not going to say that it doesn't. You know, our responsibility is to the broader community of Marion. But if you want to change it and say that we should negotiate an agreement, that's perfectly fine. We've just been following prior council instruction.
And I will just speak to your comment, sir. While I have in the past done work for the landowner, I'm not representing them on this matter, and my firm is not as far as I know. And thank you for stating that you don't believe there's a conflict of interest, but I'm not sure why you felt compelled to include that in your comments.
From our point of view, it just looks that way, and we have no input other than
Well,
that. And
I've excluded myself from discussions and voting on issues dealing with this parcel. So I've removed the conflict.
We know that now.
I hope you appreciate that.
We know that now.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I guess that I would say is that completing the annexation does not preclude us from continuing to negotiate to come up with an agreement for the installation of water and sewer. One of the things that the 10th Street agreement was designed to do was to make sure that the city council had to give very serious consideration about to whether or not we wanted to serve that area with water and sewer because of the cost for the project. When you have these areas where their lots might be an acre or larger, as they've illustrated, I think pretty effectively, the cost to serve one property on an acre with water and sewer can be very prohibitive. When developers come in and do it, they're putting it in, but they're spreading that cost over 3, maybe 4 properties fronting that street rather than just one. So, the circumstances are different as they have outlined. It's definitely more burdensome.
I'd like to know what in their proposal that you don't like, that the city doesn't like.
Well, in essence, if we have the ability to do an 80-20 annexation, we are really negotiating against ourselves. We're tying the hands of future city councils. Technology may change, options may change, rules may change regarding septic tanks, and that is a long-term agreement. If we're in a position where we have an 80-20 annexation and you can complete an annexation without entering into an agreement like that, just long term, that's preferable because you're not then tying yourself or tying future councils to have that. I fully understand that they feel like there's a contingent liability out there because the costs are unknown and the dates are unknown. That's perfectly valid. I just don't know that, when we did the agreement with 10th Street, we spent money to hire an engineering firm to come in and do designs so that we had an idea about what it was going to cost. With an 80-20 annexation, that seems like an additional expense that really wouldn't need to be spent.
And I'd just point out too that since we've done the other 2 annexations, I've not received one call from one person that said we had issues with sales or we've had any issues with the agreement or we need to start down the road of doing something with regard to the agreement. Or I need sewer, I need water, I can't get sewer, I can't get water, the county's holding me up. I understand the concern because all of a sudden...
Tom?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I have it. Sorry, Beth. I understand the concern, but at this point, none of those issues have come to fruition. And I can tell you out of 10th Street, there is a tremendously more difficult septic problem than exists here. And so for all intents and purposes, these guys in this neighborhood could have their well and septic for 20 more years. So why would we enter into an agreement that would tie us to a cost, which I think is 25% of the cost to do that sewer if it's 25 years from now? It's just, especially when we're not compelled to by virtue of having the appropriate 80-20 annexation, if in fact that's how we are able to proceed.
Isn't that what I asked about? Isn't that what I asked about?
You asked about
maintaining septic and wells until something disastrous happens and everybody has to convert over.
And what the gentleman is saying is that, let's say he wants to sell his house in 5 years, he has to undergo an inspection process. And maybe they say, there's a problem with your well and it needs to be fixed. So if he's within 250 feet, the county may say, you have to get sewer and water. You have to get water if it's a well issue. But we don't know that. I mean, that's just an unknown that we have, but it would be an unknown for the property owner as well. And if he had a sale, there would be an issue with that. But again, that would be something we would have to address. Just as there was on the agenda this evening by Mr. Sykes out off Highway 13, he came in and said, I have a septic problem, and asked for a deferment on that. I mean, when I first came here in 2001, the first meeting I had, there was a gentleman out of Winslow Court. Sewer was across the creek. He was within 250 feet, and he had to bore a sewer from his house to that, and it cost over $20,000. Now, you recall that, Mary Lou?
Is that the one Mary Ames was in on?
I don't remember the name. But nonetheless, a new septic system can cost up to $20,000. So now while they had to make that improvement, now they have a sanitary sewer system that will last them forever. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that can happen throughout this. The biggest thing that I would say is right now there are no issues. And to enter into an agreement that ties our hands can you imagine an agreement showing up that happened 15 years ago that this council has to be tied to? I mean, I just don't understand why we would get ourselves in that position if, in fact, we don't have to. So,
may I speak? The sewer and septic tank failure is a jeopardy that we face all the time, every day, right now, even before the annexation. So I don't think that's that's not an issue. The issue we have is that once this annexation goes through, this becomes something that we have to report to any potential buyers, and all we can tell them now is that someday out in the future, when somebody's septic tank fails, there's going to be a $60,000 bill coming due because you're going to have to pay to put in all these sewer and water lines. And that's something we can't avoid as house sellers. We have to disclose this per the real estate rules unless we're some kind of an estate. Then you can go with as-is sales. And that's the problem that we're having here, is the encumbrance that we get on our houses when this thing becomes effective, even before anybody's septic tank fails. And we all realize we have to put in our own septic tanks, and we have to put in our own pipes out to the city pipes. That's not the issue. I mean, that would be nice if we didn't have to, but nobody's asking for anything like that. We just want to avoid this encumbrance the same way I guess you want to avoid the encumbrance of having an agreement. So, according to state law, the purpose of these 80-20 annexations was to take into consideration the residents' needs on this, and I think a bill coming due all at once that's as high as $60,000 to individuals is just completely unreasonable, and I don't know how, I just don't know how many of these people are going to be able to pay it.
The engineering department's been unable to provide those numbers to the residences as they've asked because we don't know what the target year is. If he knew his septic tank was going to go bad in 2030, we could calculate those numbers based on that year, but because we would have to calculate an amount for 2017, 2018, 2019, we've been unable really to establish that number. We have a number from 2008 that we use, as he has done, is interpolated that forward. We would do the same thing. We would look at inflation and construction costs and interpolate that forward, but that number would not be any better than the number he has now. And I think that the costs that they have associated with their properties are very similar to the cost of any property within the city of Marion that's on septic tank that is within 250 feet of a sewer or a water main. They have to pay those costs. Each water main, each sewer that's built in the city has a hookup fee on it that those property owners have to pay. If you're out on Winslow Road, per se, you have 3 hookup fees that you have to pay at the time of hookup that were built. Some of those sewers were built 20 to 25 years ago. You too have to pay those costs. It's no different than what they would be doing.
And I guess what one of the things that maybe has made us a little gun shy on the staff side is Brookside Drive. Brookside Drive, we entered into agreements with the property owners out there for voluntary annexations. It was based on an estimated cost to serve the area, I think, of around $180,000. It ended up costing almost $400,000 for us as a city to serve that area, and every other ratepayer made up that difference in costs because what they were going to have to pay was defined by that prior agreement that then we had to hold ourselves to. And so when you enter into an agreement, there's always that danger that it can come back and bite you. We didn't want to, and I didn't feel like I could come back to the council and make a recommendation that we enter into an agreement like that if something like that could potentially occur in the future. That was an incredible investment for us, and I don't know if we even have a half a dozen people hooked up to and using that line to this day. But we had said this is the schedule, this is when it's got to be put in, this is when the annexation would occur. We had to lay out the capital to do it, and now the only time they have to make connections is their systems go defunct.
I think it needs to be studied on.
So when would the sewer and the water be put in by the city?
The only time we would put in the sewer and water from the city's perspective would be in the event that there was something that happened in the neighborhood and they came and asked us for it. I mean, there's no desire for us to go out there and provide sewer and water for, remember if you recall from the 10th Street conversation, it just does not financially make sense for the city to invest in sewer and water in that neighborhood. It just won't pay. I mean, it just won't pay for itself because the lots are so large. They're acre lots.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you can imagine what it would cost $28 a foot to run a sewer line. 28 times 200, that's what it costs to put a sewer line in that front yard. It's just, so that's the other issue is if you live in that neighborhood and your septic fails, it's not like we're going to be out there to run a sewer down there to serve you because it makes sense. If you're not within the 250 foot, there's no way that we're going to require you to hook on. We'll want you to reinvest in the septic tank because we don't want to go in there and make that project occur. It doesn't make any viable sense for the city to invest those kind of dollars when you're not going to get a return.
Marion and all city expansions are on a collision course with county lots because the county requires that every residential lot that's used in the county be 1 acre or more. So if you're going to expand, you're going to run into this everywhere, and you're going to mistreat people everywhere with this enormous cost, and it's going to wipe out some people. But that's the nature of county lots everywhere they are.
That's why there's no county lots within 2 miles of the city that have been developed recently. The city council has the ability to review every subdivision within 2 miles. And
you don't want them here.
We do not want them. No.
Yep. Well, this was built 30 or more years ago.
Yep.
And there's a few like it around, probably the North 10th. They're all acre lots mostly.
Don Drive, just north of here, will deal with the same situation.
Yep. Don Drive, Cimarron.
Yep.
Up north on 10th Street. Yep.
Lon, Tom, is there a provision in the 80-20 to spread once they have to do the sewer water? Is there a provision to spread the costs then?
That would be up to the council at the time that the system had to be put in. If one of the things that I always worry about with these is that technology can change, and someone 5-10 years from now may come up with a system that's considerably more economical to serve an area like this. And if that's the case, the costs change dramatically. And so, we would look at it and look at the costs at the time that a project had to be put together and then start to figure out, okay, what makes sense for the property owners in these particular areas. One of the struggles that you have with Shady Oak is that you do have properties that have systems that were failing now that weren't going to be able to put ones in, but the people down at the south end of that subdivision could be served a lot more easily and a lot more cheaply than the properties up to the north. So we had to come up with a way to make sure that we were being equitable across that entire 100-plus lot subdivision. This one's quite a bit smaller, a little easier to deal with. You're not putting in really separate systems that have to deal with different pieces of the subdivision. the council at the time that a project would have to be done would have to develop and approve a budget. The property owners, whoever owns the property at the time, I'm certain would be involved in that discussion for how it would be configured, and then they'd come up with a financing plan to move it forward.
And that would be part of the 80/20 agreement.
Right. Well, you never preclude the ability to do that when a project rears its head, but it's not required as part of the 80/20 annexation that it be in place ahead of time.
But you could put into the 80/20 agreement that would be negotiated at the time.
That a project were come to be brought forward, yes.
Yeah. So that would, it may not be you, but someone in the future would negotiate the terms of that cost. And it's still an unknown.
As soon as
for
that's
you.
hanging out there, my property value goes down. And we can't hide that from any potential buyers.
Think it goes down by coming into the city?
Yeah, when the annexation gets launched, we have an encumbrance. We don't know what the cost is, and we don't know what the date of implementation is. But we are required to disclose this, like any other problem with a house, like a busted furnace or something like that. This is going to be recorded. They're going to find out about it. Not that I would try to hide it or anything, but it's an encumbrance the minute this annexation goes through and becomes something that's going to happen inevitably. So we can't escape this cost, even though nothing has been spent at the time. We're going to have to tell the buyer, oh, by the way, you're going to have an annexation someday, and it's going to cost, we thought it was going to cost $60,000. Hard to have a meeting with that going on.
Yeah.
But
Somebody's not happy with
yeah.
you.
Well, I don't know if it's me. I don't know. But anyway, we can't escape this because it's going to be recorded, and the buyers will know about this, and they will offer us less money because they can see this coming someday at some unknown date. And that's our whole point. It isn't the cost of a failed tank or you must hook up over here, stuff like that. We know that's going to happen.
I would agree and disagree with you on that fact. And just from personal experience with a person or a client of mine where they purchased a home on Shady Oak after the annexation agreement was in place. They didn't offer less because of that. I mean, there was a new septic installed and stuff like that, but it didn't, at that time, it didn't affect that property's price.
Shady Oak was in place at that time?
Yeah.
Well,
So, it could. I mean,
Yep.
a buyer, it could.
Yeah, depending on how astute,
It could. It depends on the buyer.
astute the buyer is, they're going to offer less. And
Yes and no. I mean, it depends on the buyer, really, it does. So if like in the instance with my client, it was not a deal breaker to them. It was not a big issue to them.
wait till they.
But
wait
someone
till-
else,
Yeah.
it might be a big issue too.
Yep. Yep, I can see that.
Go either way on that case anyway.
The only other thing I would offer on that is that anybody who has an older septic system probably has that contingent liability out there anyway, because the septic system standards have changed.
Yeah.
I know when my parents sold their acreage and moved into town, they had a system that was only 14 years old. They had to replace it at their expense because it didn't meet the current standards for what a septic system had to do, and it cost them $18,000. So, just by virtue of coming into the city, it doesn't mean that there's not already a contingent liability out there for a house that has an older septic system
Yeah,
or
I
an
think
older
that
system
liability exists for anybody, anytime, annexation or not.
Yep.
Any other comments?
There's nothing on the agenda for Thursday night, and just for everybody's knowledge, there's nothing on the agenda for Thursday night. This was asked to be put on the agenda by the neighborhood for discussion purposes, so that's, unless there's direction from council, I have not put anything on the agenda for Thursday evening. So.
Okay. No more comments? Thank you.
Okay.
Make sure you don't forget your drive. Yeah, let me get this out of here for you.
What's that whoever, that
Well, dual screen thing is hard to get used to.
And that's all I have.
Yeah. Al.
potty break, a potty break.
I know, I have to go to.
Sorry, their agreement is on the electronic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I haven't made it through everything.
Yeah, it's
Sure, but the fact that it's on his own septic and
Well,
But if we're gonna run the South Terrace through right above it,
water, I mean, it's all gonna be there.
yeah.
But if they don't,
Lon, next.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we'll get ready for her to come back.
I was gonna say, it's probably occupied.
Get a head start.
Yeah, I'm just going to run through a couple things. Okay. Wanted to have a discussion with the council regarding the CIP. We've had a chance to go through all of the scores that were submitted. We'll say somewhat tongue-in-cheek that some of you follow directions better than others as far as doing the scoring so that we can be consistent from council member to council member. The way that the system was set up, anything that was in the top quartile, the score should show up in red. Second quartile was yellow. Third quartile, or the bottom half, was blue. None of the scores fell into the red quartile. So for all intents and purposes, what that means is the yellow quartile is your top scores. So those are the ones that we would proceed with starting to piece into the CIP over the next couple of years. Where I wanted to see if there was any further discussion the council wanted to have was about the projects that are showing up down here in blue. If there were any that you felt had any compelling reason that they should be brought forward, or anything that needed to be moved back down. Several of the ones that are down there are ones that are ongoing programs that we fund every year or every other year, things like our sanitary sewer repair program, traffic signal program. I would expect us to continue to make investments in those, even though they're considered to be blue, because that's, even though they're in the second quartile, because that is operating programs, things that we need to do every year just to make sure that we're keeping up and maintaining the system that we've got. So as you look down that list, just really needed to know if there was anything that any council members really felt ought to be moved up into that next grouping as we start to piece these together. Once we know that, then we will proceed with putting together the formal document to bring back to the council for annexation. We're looking at having the public hearing on it in April, and we'll get the new CIP adopted.
Lon, I had a question about the spread.
Okay.
Yep.
Projects like West 8th that scored poorly, that we are actually under development right now, was that because it's already funded, because it's already proceeding, or was there not an interest to proceed with that project even though it's funded?
When was it, Dan?
West 8th.
The only projects that were included in the scoring were those that don't have 100% funding yet. So though it might be partially funded, anything that was only had some allocations did appear on the prioritization for council to score. So there's a lot of other projects that do not appear here that are 100% funded.
Still goes back to my question, is it a project we proceed with or not?
Yep, that's why we need to have the discussion with the council.
And I didn't rate that one high because I didn't think it was as far as need, as high a need as some other things, so.
I guess that's the question I'm asking.
I think that there's probably a lot of, I would bet that every council member had a different understanding as we were doing this, and I think next year would be beneficial that we were all in the same room, not to discuss what our scores are, but that we can ask questions and all be on the same page as to what. I mean, I had a lot of questions doing it, but I'll bet it would be a lot different result if we were at least in the same room and could ask a question, specific to that project. If it's a 5, does it mean this? If it's a 1, does it mean this? I think that would add a lot of benefit.
Yeah, and the other thing that we'll need to do with this going forward is this one didn't really have a public input component, but once we have the basic 5-year document put together, that's something that then we can put out for public perusal, especially in the out years, because I think that's an important piece to making sure that we're prioritizing the right projects. But we wanted to get something on. We knew that the process wasn't going to be perfect the first time around, but at least we'll have something that we can build on moving forward.
Okay.
Anything anybody has any suggestions, concerned about, wants to move?
Anyone? Will there be more opportunity to give input?
Yeah, and
Okay.
keep in mind, too, that with the capital improvement program, this is a guiding document. It's not the be-all, end-all of everything that's actually going to happen. It's a council-adopted document, so you've got the ability to amend it or change it at any time. Certainly things like that happen. You know, all it takes is a sanitary sewer collapse underneath of a street to move the street up the repair and replacement schedule. So there are those circumstances that call for these to be changed. As we look at these, and especially with ones that are going to fall down in that blue area that might not be fully funded, for example, if a grant opportunity came up to close that funding gap, we may come to you and say, look, we can get this grant to pay for this one, so let's move that one up the priority schedule. If there's no other changes or objections that anybody has, we'll start to put this into a much more user-friendly and readable format so that it's something that is a little easier to work with going forward.
I guess one of the things that came up when I was doing it was the library project, and I wondered why we would have input into it for right now. Would that be
It's funding.
I mean, we aren't, in the near term, there isn't a funding issue, a funding thing that we have to come up with, is there?
No, not yet, but because that one is partially funded out of the local option sales tax, anything that had dedicated partial funding got put into the mix because there were projects that decisions were going to have to be made on in priority order. And something like that, if it had slid all the way down to the bottom of the priority list, we might have been doing a joint session with the library board to say, hey, look, you know, we need to talk about this and tweak it some more. You know, obviously the fact that it was in the top quarter of projects is an indication that overall the council has support for allowing them to move forward through the process until they're ready to come to you with their recommendations.
Okay.
All right. There's no other questions on that. I wanted to see if the council had any concerns about us entering into a listing agreement with Skogman Realty for the fiber right property. This one and number 6 following it are actually related. One of the things that happened when we acquired the Hennessy property on both sides of 44th Street next to the public service property and the other city property that we already owned is that there were several real estate transactions already in development that we kind of preempted. Companies that were looking for locations wanted to go down there, and one of those was Anderson Automotive, who we'd been helping to try to find a location. They're interested in acquiring part of the fiber right site, but as part of our purchase agreement with Brian Rostek and Skogman's for the Hennessy property, the agreement said that any balance of property that we have on the fiber right site, they wanted to have the first crack at being able to list. Our intent would be to sell that property and get projects going on it really as quickly as we can, because the proceeds of that sale will offset a big chunk of the purchase price of the Hennessy property down on a little bit further south down on 44th Street. So the piece that we were working with directly that is outside of Skogman's purview, which is about 4 acres, would be exempt from the listing agreement. So there wouldn't be a commission or anything paid on that. Brian Rostek is representing one of the other users that is interested in buying part of the site. In order to allow them to continue and have our site under consideration, he would want to have the listing on that, and then there would be a balance of a piece over to the west that would need to be listed as well. We're just not wanting to hold on to the property any longer than we have to, because the sooner we get it in production, the sooner we get investment and jobs created on it. The 2 users between Anderson and the other user would probably be creating anywhere between 24 and 29,000 square feet of new buildings. So good-sized structures.
Questions?
Yeah.
So no objections to that? Okay.
You want to address 13? Oh, okay. Just wanted to call your attention to number 13. That's an amendment to our master service agreement with Involta. As you might recall, we switched the way that we're doing a lot of our IT infrastructure to contracting out for it with Involta rather than buying and purchasing it on our own. One of the things that we can do by doing that is that we can tap into their buying power and their ability to do our Microsoft server licensing rather than paying for it directly. So this is something that's basically cost neutral for us. It just means that we won't be doing it directly, but our original agreement with Involta did not specify that they provide that service on our behalf, so we're amending the agreement to allow them to buy that licensing for us.
So is this something that, as technology catches up to this, then we'll be buying another one, another server or whatever, another system? Is that an ongoing expense then? I guess
It's an annual ongoing service agreement that we have with Involta, but when we did the analysis of it, based on today's costs to buy and maintain our own system and buy our own licensing, it was going to be cheaper over time to contract out with Involta. The big benefit that we get by doing that is just that Involta's equipment that they have in their cages out there right now is of a caliber and quality that we would never be able to afford going in and buying it on our own. So we're getting access to far superior equipment than we would be buying. They have their own replacement schedule. We don't pay extra or anything like that. If they have a server go down in our rack, they replace that, they fix it. They take care of all the maintenance. We're just paying them to have access to the server capacity and the data capacity.
I guess what I'm asking is this in addition to the agreement that we have with them?
It is, but it's a cost that we have to pay anyway because we have to pay for our Microsoft server licenses regardless of whether they're on-premise or off-premise. This will just let them do it since it's going on their servers rather than us doing it on our own.
Okay.
It's cost neutral for us. It doesn't cost any more one way or another.
Okay.
But
Good.
the original agreement didn't allow them to do it on our behalf.
Okay. Gotcha.
You want to do number 14? That was on this one.
Okay, number 14 is an agreement for billboard access. Right now, the city owns 2 billboards at 107th Avenue, and we receive payments in an amount of $3,000 annually for renting that space out. What we are proposing to do is to utilize billboards for advertising or just promoting information about projects that we have going on, all the construction that will happen over the next year. And what this agreement does is allow us 4 6-week increments at that 107th Avenue location, and then 4 6-week increments at billboards and other locations across Marion. They will do all the printing and graphic design work for us, so it's a value of about $7,500 for the city just for that $3,000 annual rental fee that would be foregoing.
That's it. We would just forego the rental income.
Yeah, we would not be receiving the $3,000 in annual rental fees, but it's a value of approximately $7,500 for the city.
Having purchased billboard time, that's a deal.
We would.
So there's no cost to the city for doing this.
And we would be potentially avoiding other costs of having to put out that information.
Yeah, there's a pretty significant advertising package then that we'd be able to take advantage of that we don't have access to right now. If we wanted to go do that, we'd be paying regular commercial rates just like any other potential user.
Couldn't get them to put an electronic sign in those sites, could we?
What kind of information are you planning to use that for?
It would be associated with projects. We might put a timeline of a project or something like that up there. It might be related to an event that we're going to have coming up in the city. Just different things that the city is involved in throughout the course of the year.
Is this something that you want to continue to do year after year, or is this what's the thought here?
Well, right now this proposal is just for a 1-year period.
Sure.
Just kind of try it out.
Yep, if it's successful, we can
See
bring
what
it back for a further amendment.
And I did just want to mention that some items 15 carrying down through 21 are all related to professional services agreements for the Art in the Alleys project. With the Art in the Alleys project getting set to start moving forward, you're going to start seeing pieces of that coming to the City Council. These are all contracts with artists for the professionally commissioned pieces that are going to be coming through there. I would say that we've got a pretty good mix, a good combination of local artists and out-of-area artists, so it's going to have a pretty good flavor for the area when it's all completed.
Now, is this paid for by that $350,000?
These are Art Place grant expenses.
So this, the city is not paying anything, this will be from that grant?
The grants, and then there's pretty significant offsetting donations to sponsor some of these pieces as well.
Donations, okay, just so the city doesn't have, cause it comes to $118,000, so.
Yeah, and there'll be some stuff like, these wouldn't include things like foundation work and those types of pieces that need to be done to actually install some of them. So those might show up separately.
Who chose these particular artists and these particular items?
Go ahead.
So we had an artist selection panel that was led by Karen Hoyt, our art director. They went through a pretty regimented process. First, an RFQ that went out nationwide. Over 80 artists did respond to that. The artist selection panel then whittled that down and requested final RFPs from the finalists that were identified. And so these 7, there's an additional 2 that will appear on a future council agenda, were the ones that were identified through that process. And then just to clarify, in the foundation work, that has already been included in the bid with the contractor that the city did approve. So those costs have already been approved by the city council.
Anything on that? Now we'll move on to 22. Charlie Knutson, as the council will know, has filed a couple of letters with the city council asking that the council take a look at the city's current charter and how our election rules are set up. There are a couple different ways that can happen. Amending the charter can be done in a couple of different ways. It can be done by the city council directly, which is then subject to a reverse referendum. It can be done where the city council puts something out on the ballot for the public to weigh in on. Specifically, what he's been asking for is that we take a look at how ward elections are done in the city of Marion, asking that only the residents of a ward be allowed to vote on a particular candidate. I know Mr. Draper has brought that up with council in the past, but we've never been given any direction either to the legal department or to the staff to actually follow up on that. There's a couple of different advantages and disadvantages to each. The primary argument for ward members being elected only by the people of that ward is that out of ward, and it has happened a couple of times in prior elections, that it's possible for a candidate that lives in a ward to win a ward but not be elected because the rest of the community, the other candidate wins in other neighborhoods or other wards around the community. And the argument is that the views of that ward, the people of that ward should be the ones who are voting for that person, and the size of our wards now is bigger really than Hiawatha. The flip side of it, the other argument gets down to who is that individual supposed to represent. And the argument is that if a person stands for election in a ward and the ward votes for them but the rest of the community does not, that's an indication that the rest of the community doesn't want to have that person on the city council. The crux of that argument is that even though a council member is elected from a ward, they're making decisions that affect everybody in the rest of the community. Setting water rates, setting property tax rates, deciding what streets should go where, what capital improvement priorities should be, those all affect everyone, and that everyone should have an opportunity then to have a say in whether or not that person is elected or continues on the city council. So it's something that, I don't know that I have a strongly held opinion on one way or the other, but there are arguments for both ways. The one thing I will say is that I don't believe that it's a good practice to change the way that you're doing elections just because someone is unhappy at the results of a prior election. If that's your impetus for wanting to change it, that's not a reason to look at changing your election rules. to me, it has to be part of a broader discussion about how do we elect people, what do we expect. I've been in communities that do it both ways. My first community, every council member was elected at large because we weren't large enough to have wards. In my next community in Platteville, we had council members that were only elected by the members of those wards. I can say my experience there is that especially for the ward that had the university in it, it did encourage some parochialism. You tended sometimes to get people elected from that ward who only were concerned about what was going on in that ward and not the broader community as a whole. It manifested itself most often, it didn't happen while I was there, but several times a university student would run, and any university student that would run would get elected because of the size of the college population. But they usually didn't run until they were juniors, so they never filled out their terms. They'd graduate and leave. And then the city would end up having to stand for the cost of a special election. So there's benefits and disadvantages to both ways. It really is a council decision. I just thought rather than, continuing to receive and file letters from Charlie about this, it deserves some council discussion, and you can tell us if you want us to proceed one way or another.
When this whole thing came up about being everybody voting at large, the size of Marion was what the size of a ward is now, and that's why it was at large. So I can understand it going election from the area that you're nominated from. But I also would like to see wards 1 and 3 doing an at large, and then 2 and 4 doing an at large. So you've got one on the north side, one on the south side. That would give more fairness, I think, to an overall look at what's going on.
One other thing I should mention is that if we did make a change to where you had to be elected in the wards, right now we've had a situation with this last election where Councilman Crawford was elected from a ward, the census changed the ward boundaries, and then he moved outside of his ward. You'd no longer have the ability to do that. If you are elected by ward, you must always reside in that ward. Sometimes people elect to move out of their own recognizance, but in a case like that, his house didn't move, but the boundaries changed. So there is some risk in a growing community that something like that could occur again.
Oh, I think that would be just an exception to the rule. There would have to be exceptions.
There's one other possible issue that I've considered. Right now, we have no problem in terms of one person, one vote, because there's just as many people eligible to vote for each and every council seat. So there's no issue there. If we were to elect the 4 ward seats by ward, they're going to have fewer voters than the 3 at-large seats. So I think that could create a problem right there. But you also have the problem of the 4 ward seats have to be balanced in terms of one person, one vote. Right now, I think Tom tries to level it out somewhat. But to really meet the standards, we have to try to get it down to where it's exact. If you have block data, it's a lot easier than if you just have enumeration district data, because I've done that with the state legislature in a Supreme Court case about 40 years ago where I worked on the decision. But I have concern that the wards would not have the same number of voters as the at-large. And so far I haven't found a case on point whether you can mix and match like that or not. I'll keep looking, but it's an issue.
To underscore Don's point on that one a little bit, if you look back to the 2010 census, since we did not do a midterm special census the last time around, by the time we got around to 2010 and needed to redistrict, Councilman Spinks's ward had more than 2,000 more people in it than the ward that Councilwoman Pazur represents right now.
I'm a large right now.
Oh, sorry. I think you were ward then.
And I kind of thought that was, if you look at the voters, Hunter's Ridge can decide a Marion election at the rate the people vote there. And I just thought it would be more fair if a ward itself had a council person who they elected who would represent their ward along with the city. And Don, we have the set situation now. Some of us got more votes than others. You know, you don't have to worry about a balance, I don't think.
Well, now you don't, because you're all elected at large.
Right. So, but you're going to have some folks get more votes than others, is what I'm saying. Always in any election, or they wouldn't be there.
Well, it's not the votes you get, it's how many people can vote for you.
Yeah, I realize it. It's the number of votes, so it ends up in that area. The voters decided to do it the way we do it now. We did it at an election where we nominated by ward, and then had the second option was to elect citywide, and we were all shocked when that happened. I think those of us old guys in town anyway, that's how that ended up.
He was pointing
But,
at you.
you know, our wards, like Lon said, we have a whole city council representing some cities that don't have the population of one of our wards. And it makes sense to me anyway. And Councilman Bezer talks about kind of a north side, south side at-large councilman, and that may be wise also. I don't know. We're split now, but I think it has some merit to think about and to decide. I don't know that we'd be any different up here if we had elected by ward. But we just need to think about who's voting anymore and who doesn't vote, and it doesn't come out right sometimes when one section of town can decide the whole council up here. To me, it doesn't anyway.
Could this be figured out so that it could go on the ballot for this November?
That's entirely up to council. I mean, it would be, the council would have to direct us. You know, if you think back to the strategic plan and the strategic plan priorities, you've got limited time, limited dollars, and limited personnel. The council has to decide how that gets used. If it's a council priority, then it's something that we'll do. But, you know, it hasn't been yet. It hasn't been something that got put into the strategic plan, but that's why I wanted to have the discussion to see if overall the council has an interest in looking at this. I'd like to see personally what the results are of the special census, because I'd like to see how that balance, if it's continuing to get out of balance for voters in places like Ward 2, like has been the case in the past, just to see how that growth is influencing it.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would there be any cost to the city for changing the rules? Very much cost in changing this?
It depends on which method you choose to do it. The council can elect to do an ordinance to amend the charter. If you do that, people have the option to do a petition to force an election on that. If they force an election on it, then you could potentially have the cost of a special election. If you go the other route and choose to put a change out there, and you do it when you've already got an election scheduled, it doesn't, other than your costs in legal time to develop it and make sure that you follow the rules, you don't have additional special election costs.
So the best time is during any election year.
I think, well,
Okay.
it's this year.
Yeah. Another thing. Do you think it would kind of prohibit people from running? Would that, would less people run if it was changed? I just don't know.
My philosophy has always been that the city should do as little as we put as few impediments in the way of people wanting to run as we can. Sometimes, it hasn't been really the case in Marion. As long as I continue to make people mad, we'll still have plenty of candidates out there running. But communities can sometimes struggle to get candidates on the ballot, and in that case, you don't want anything out there that impedes somebody's ability to run.
If I could just say one, it may not be a cost issue, but for the planning department, staff of 3, busy schedule, to go through and do what Don's talking about, I have a concern. So that's a lot of time. There's a lot of time spent on making sure that all those districts, wards, and are all structured in a manner that we have equality. And it's not generally a positive reaction when we go switching those wards around as well. So there's just so the council's aware, if that's in fact what we need to do, then there's a process to rearrange those wards. And there's a lot of parameters with regard to that would have to come forward. And just so you're aware, it's not just okay, we'll just make that happen and it doesn't cause any issues dollars-wise, but it is staff.
And Lynn County has to be involved with that as well.
Yeah,
I've heard the, pros and cons on both sides, and, and I'm willing to be convinced, but, I guess in my mind, everybody's supposed to represent the whole city. And I don't like, maybe there's an argument for the ward representatives being elected by the ward, but this north-south thing, it bothers me. It bothers me because we're trying to, I don't like divisiveness. And it's just, we're supposed to be breaking down those feelings, about north and south and this side and that side. We should be trying to get rid of that, those feelings and those false separations like that. I just don't like divisiveness. That's just my initial thoughts on it.
Yes, and my thought, I think it's a really bad idea to change what we have right now because, we have interest in our wards that we bring forward, but we vote on just about everything we vote on up here is for Marion. And it's no different from, whether we're at large or a ward person that, we look at things for Marion, and if it happens to be in our ward, yeah, we are a proponent or against it or whatever. But I think the way that we ought to go about looking at changing it is not the council looking at it, is I think we ought to start adding this to our city survey and find out what the citizens would think about changing it.
And this just occurred to me while you were talking, Joe, that, in one way, if you're concerned about the wards being really represented, having the wards elect their own representative is a way to kind of guarantee that those people are only going to vote for what's in the best interest of their ward, where if I have to run for Ward 4 or Ward 3 or Ward 2, and I have to get the whole city to elect me, then I have to pay attention to the whole city, and I have to care about every ward, which we should, all of us anyway. Right. Then I have to make sure that I'm not just caring about my ward, I'm caring about the interests of the entire city because I need to get elected by the entire city. Again, I don't like divisiveness.
Well, I'll tell you.
Tell me.
This north-south, 7th Avenue used to be the dividing line. If you lived north of 7th Avenue, you were the Pucker Street elite. If you lived south of 7th Avenue, you were the tough guys like I was, and where most of the athletes came out of. But it's always just been that way. And look at it still. It still is because you got Linn-Mar North, Marion South. You're gonna have a split anyway. But the people that are elected from the ward would probably hear more from their ward as far as things that they want to see happen or upset with or whatever. And I think there'd be more citizen input.
It isn't even fair for those of us, the mayor and Slug and I, to run, I needed 237 signatures. The ward councilman needed 18, I think, because of the way the county sets the thing up. So you don't even, we need to tweak it a little bit if you're not going to change it. If we're all elected at large, we should need the same number of signatures. Now, they need the signatures, 18 of them, from your ward to run. And the rest of us at large could get them anywhere in town. But certainly the same number of people should nominate that person to run, as whether if we're all at large or if we're going to be at ward. level.
The only real parallel I've got to kind of draw on with it for anything that's been done here was the old CIP Advisory Committee, because the old CIP Advisory Committee was really done with regard to geographic areas of the community to make sure that everybody was represented. They only met once after I arrived here, but what I saw during that meeting was people advocating and pushing for things in their neighborhoods. And that's always my fear when you're only representing the interests of that neighborhood, that you can sometimes lose that broader perspective for the entire community. Again, it's up to the council on how you proceed with it. We'll do whatever the council wants to do on this. Certainly could follow up with Joe's suggestion about doing some questions on the citizen survey to see what the public at large would like to have to say. They have the ability right now, I believe, to petition for a change to the charter. So there are options available if people feel about it that strongly. Right now, we've really only heard from one. So, or at least only one has been willing to file an official request with us.
Well, maybe something to look at, but it's not a change that you rush into, I think. I think we really need to look at it, study it, make sure we know what the, what the impact is. And
the only other thing I could say that the council could have as an option is, Cedar Rapids, when they made their change in form of government, one of the requirements they had is that they had to reconvene the Charter Review Commission a certain number of years after they had that. You could always appoint a group to go out and do some more in-depth research on it on your behalf and come back with recommendations.
Well, the reason I said about this year being an election year and putting it on the ballot, because the following year, it's a city election again, so it would be in time for that.
okay. So are you looking for a decision?
I guess I don't know that I'm sensing consensus support that this is something we should focus on right now.
I disagree with it, doing it. I want to leave it just the way it is, because that's worked for how many years?
But the number of people living in Marion was different than it is now, and the economic makeup was considerably different than it is now. So you can't say that, you're talking apples and oranges. You're not talking about the same playing field, so to speak.
I think we need to hear from more people, I think. Right now, just one person.
Well, the problem is, I tell these people, okay, you've got a complaint, you want something, addressed and all, and they say, we elected you to take care of it. Well, that's fine, and I have a big mouth, and I'll express myself, but I am but one person, and so therefore, I guess we're just going to have to start filling the place. You may be sorry you brought that up, Joe.
I've got broad shoulders.
I think we thought it was important that we had a supervisor with a district. You can remember when all of the supervisors, 3 of them then, lived 2 blocks apart in Cedar Rapids. And those of us in the county and the other cities never felt like we got a fair share out of that until the time came when we did have the redistricting, and we do have a supervisor representing Marion now. And I think we'd have some sections of town, and Nick, you're right, you wish it wasn't that way, who feel they don't have representation at the council level when everybody in another section of town can elect that council. So I guess that's my feeling on the thing. I think a ward councilman has a great advantage. I see a ward councilman in his ward having meetings about this sort of thing with folks and representing that ward first and the city second. They elected him. He lives there. The ward person does. And he understands and knows his ward better than any of the rest of us. And he would know at a decision being made on one of these how his people felt. He could explain that to the rest of the council, which Lou's you lose contact when suddenly there's 40,000 people. You know, each ward is 10,000 people, for goodness sakes. I see an advantage either way, probably, but I see that I think we have some sections of our community that at times don't feel they're represented. And I don't know how many calls I get saying, hey, you're putting everything up north. You got the Y up there, you got this, you got that. And you know, when you hear that, and I don't, that further splits that up, and I don't like that. I'd like to see the city together on these things.
The other thought, Paul, though, is that, you know, if we as in ward representatives if we're doing a bad job, then there's going to be more people apply to run for the ward.
It would cost a lot less to
Well,
run as a ward councilman.
Well, but I see that, you know,
Signs in your ward, you'd only need,
yeah. So that's how I see it.
door in your ward instead.
That's how I see that it, you know, it corrects itself from what you're saying is that, you know, if that ward representative is doing a bad job, then you'll see 3 or 4 people run for it against them. Right. So, anyway, I'm against it. Have I said that?
I think it's a good idea to have the survey.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if the survey says it, you know, if you get a bunch of people on the survey, yeah. I mean, that's what the people want, and that's what I think we should listen to. But for one person to write a letter and say we ought to do that,
Change the charter? I mean,
yeah. I mean,
And that's why what I was leading to earlier is that, you know, most of the time requests to change your method of election come about when someone's not happy with the results of the prior election. And to me, that is the worst reason to change it, is because somebody was unhappy with the results of it. You know, we've got a system that has served us well. As to Paul's point, it may need some tweaking. There's probably some things about it that should change. I just don't see a request from one specific group of people necessarily as a compelling reason to go change the rules for everybody. And if you want to get a true assessment of public opinion on it, the citizen survey is probably the best way to do it, because it's something that we can make sure is statistically valid and gets a random sample of people from across the community and isn't something that's going to be unduly influenced by one particular interest group.
Well, Charlie had enough courage to write the letter, because there are a lot of people who say, well, it won't make any difference what I say because they're not going to pay attention. And that's just the attitude.
Well, on Mr. Knutsen's behalf, Lon, he didn't write the letter because he was dissatisfied with the election. I know that is a fact. So, but what you say is true. That can happen. Could happen all the time. But that isn't why Charlie wrote the letter.
Well, the next one then is regarding a sign request that Bob Schlegel had sent in. Obviously, I think the council is well aware that Mr. Schlegel has continuing concerns with noise up in his neighborhood. Being on the other side of the street and down a little ways, I can't say that he's wrong. He hears the Harleys, I hear the sport bikes. They turn off of that road, they turn off of 10th Street, or they turn off of Alburnett Road, and they've got a nice clear spot where they've got good visibility and no side streets and not a ton of pedestrians. If Harry's not around or one of his people isn't around, the temptation to crack the throttle and have a little fun can be pretty hard to resist, I'm sure. The issue with this is that Mr. Schlegel had indicated that this was a sign that he got off of a site that was government approved. I can't find that it's in the manual on uniform traffic control devices anywhere, and only signs that conform to the MUTCD should be placed in the city road right-of-way. And the reason I'll tell you that is because if you put a sign that does not conform to the MUTCD in the road right-of-way and you write a ticket on it, and that person chooses to defend it and find out that it's not a conforming sign, you will get it thrown out. They're a nice idea. They're great for the people that are going to voluntarily follow the rule, but they're unenforceable. That's happened in each and every state that I have ever worked in, is that a sign that does not conform to the MUTCD cannot be enforced. And so I don't know if I was trying to look and do some research to see if there was a sign that was that you could use and that was applicable under the MUTCD. Everything I found that was related to noise complaints that was eligible in there was related to engine braking. You might have seen, engine brakes prohibited and things like that, but nothing that was more of a general sign like this. The only other thing I would worry about with this is being in the location where he's at, and if I'm a 16-year-old kid driving a car or a truck that's got loud mufflers on it and I see this sign, what's the natural inclination going to be? I think there's a significant potential it could have exactly the opposite impact of what he was intending.
Is there an ordinance that even supports putting up this sign?
We have a noise ordinance. I'll let Harry or Dan weigh in on that.
Does it apply to this?
The guy Saturday asked about the decibel level.
Lon's exactly right. This sign is unenforceable. Putting up would be more harm than good, to be quite honest with you. We don't put up signs to regulate traffic or to quiet them down. That's what the police force is for. I talked to Mr. Schlegel. I told him that we did some directed patrol out there, the hours he wants, to help alleviate this problem. We do have a muffler ordinance. We do have a noise ordinance. And the problem is with this, we have to go with the noise ordinance. It has to be from his property line, which I think the chance of them being over when it can be 15, 60 decibels is going to be pretty slim. But we can check all these motorcycles. Naturally, the speed's easy. The motorcycles we can check to make sure that they left the baffles in, their mufflers, because they have to do that. Has to be a working muffler. And I have a feeling the ones that he's hearing do not have baffles in them. So this is something that we're working on to help. I get this, to be quite honest, every year from from Robert. We're on first name basis now because we talk. But that sign will do no good, and it's unenforceable. And if you start putting the signs like that up, Your Honor, you're going to be putting them up in a lot of other places that we can't do much with.
We had a person at the library Saturday ask us what the decibel level is. Do you know what is that?
What area?
What's offensive decibel level?
Well, in most areas it's like 60 decibels. Depends on the time of day and depends on if it's residential or commercial. And I don't have that in front of me, but usually it's right around that area. Like I said.
A certain distance, or?
Yeah, it's from wherever the complaint is, from his yard, you aim it to wherever that noise is. Yeah. And if it's over, then he's over. So if it's real close, it's easy. But if you're a long ways away, he could be over, but you might be too far, and we wouldn't be able to use it.
That same fellow, Joe, had an interesting theory. He said it's safer if the motorcycle is louder instead of you can't hear it. Yeah. A pedestrian can hear the motorcycle coming. That was his
well, that's
theory.
The first time I heard that.
I can tell you that I have some experience on
with
noise.
Loud vehicles and fast vehicles?
I went to a car show, and I was in Wisconsin and got stopped about 2 o'clock in the morning for loud mufflers and some other Mickey Mouse stuff, but blue dot taillights and something. And I asked the guy where his meter was, and he said, yeah. I tore the ticket up and threw it away and lost my driving privileges in Wisconsin for about 2 years. And then I wrote to a company attorney up there and said, take this, ask a guy if his ears. And eventually we did go to court, and I won that. But he said, yeah, your mufflers are too loud. How do you tell? Ain't going to work. Okay. Blue dot taillights I paid a ticket for, Harry.
And we'll continue to explore that and see if there are potentially some long-term solutions for that in that area. But right now, about the only thing that you can do that I think is going to have a positive impact on it is some targeted enforcement to make sure that people are aware of it. If there was a sign that we could put up legally in the right-of-way that was enforceable, I wouldn't have an objection to it. Just this current sign doesn't meet that standard.
Yeah, I think what you will enforce, we ought to put into the quarterly magazine and publish that. It's like it's 60 decibels at 800 feet or whatever.
You should go on a billboard.
But anyway, I think that needs to be published and put out in the city information. And rather than
Where was
put
it
up
on the news today? Some city put up suicidal deer signs. They had a deer and it said suicidal deer.
See, now, in my own ear, I like a Chevy, deep-throated Chevy over a Ford, but now that's me.
Joe, I had a lot of respect for you, and you just lowered my standard.
Is that it on that one?
Yeah, I can, I'll get a hold of Bob and let him know what the result of the discussion was.
I wrote him yesterday and today and a couple days ago, so if he has any questions, have him get a hold of me.
Ask him how loud his Oldsmobile is.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Used to be.
So the last thing that you've got scheduled for today on the agenda is I, which is heading into closed session to start the evaluation process for city manager. I think Don probably has to give you his opinion, and then I have to give you my consent.
Before you vote, let me give you my opinion. I reviewed the subject matter, and it's appropriate under state law.
So, motion in a second?
We need a motion in a second.
Yep. I motion to adjourn to closed session regarding personal matters.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding personnel matters. All those in favor or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
That requires a roll call
All
vote.
those opposed?
That
Oh,
requires.
I'm sorry. Roll call?
Sorry.
Always forget.
Ms. Pazur?
Yes.
Ms. Setzel? Yes. Mr. Spinks?
Yes.
Mayor Abalosely?
Yes.
Mr. Brandt?
Yes.
Mr. Draper?
Yes.
Thank you.